Okay, we got everybody ready. There we go. Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Edina City Council meeting. It is Tuesday, March 4th, 2025, and 7 p.m. And we welcome all of you that are here with us this evening and tuning in virtually as well. As Director Benarott said, some of you may be watching on cable TV or on YouTube.com, Edina TV. We have been doing this through the pandemic, and after the pandemic, we've continued the process of having these hybrid type meetings so that people have an opportunity to participate in the city council process, in the public process. Tonight, there's one opportunity to call in, and that's with respect to community comment. We don't have any public hearings tonight, so no public hearing opportunity, but community comment if you wish to talk to the council about something that's not on the agenda tonight or scheduled for a future public hearing. We welcome your comments and concerns. Having provided that information, I'm going to call the meeting to order and ask our clerk, Sharon Ellison, to call the roll.
Councilmember Agnew.
Here.
Councilmember Jackson.
Here.
Councilmember Pierce.
Here.
Councilmember Risser.
Here.
Mayor Hovland.
Here. Next is the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, everybody, for that. As Member Jackson points out, that is the third time today that we've had the Pledge of Allegiance. We've been involved in meetings, and a day brimming with patriotism, as you said earlier.
That's right.
Yeah, so we've got a form of meeting agenda in front of us. It's been distributed to the public in advance of the meeting, as we usually do and are required to do. Is there anybody that wants, on the council or staff, that wishes to change the meeting agenda in any form or fashion or amend it? Is there a motion to approve the meeting agenda as published?
So moved. A second.
Member Jackson moves. Member Agnew seconds. Yeah, the adoption of the meeting agenda. Any further discussion? All those in favor of adopting the meeting agenda as published, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Carried. The meeting agenda is adopted in the form that it was published, in which it was published. And now we are at community comment. It comes up fairly quickly. We've got some folks in the audience, I think, that want to visit with the council on matters of concern to them. We'll go to them first, and then we'll go to see if anybody is online that wishes to address the council on a matter of the concern to them as well.
Mayor, council members, my name is Ralph Sickert. I live at 4311 Cornelia Circle. Fact, over the last 10 years, the city has allowed millions of tax dollars to flow to the HRA to fund projects that should have been vetted and funded via a bonding bill or directly via the general levy. This practice has encouraged the funding of poorly vetted and ill-advised projects. Look no further than the recently failed Innovation Lab and this year's capital spending plan. The capital spending plan presented to the council in December includes $16.5 million, previously diverted to the HRA over a decade ago. $16.5 million now to be spent for a pedestrian tunnel under France. And if we are to believe the presentation made to the council last October, it is a project which will absorb yet another $14 million. So a total of $30 million for a pedestrian tunnel under France, an amount equal to more than $1,000 for every voting household in Edina. Diverting tax revenue to the HRA through the failure to close a district on a timely basis or the inclusion of unvetted projects diverts revenue from the general levy, millions of dollars, which may have gone to reduce the tax burden on residents. And because it's money spent outside the general levy, the public awareness and scrutiny of that spending is so sorely lacking. Council, when will the ongoing HRA's diversion of Edina's tax dollars be discussed in a forthright manner or will millions of dollars remain in the shadows? As was the $30 million for the pedestrian tunnel under France? Or does the council consider this final representation by staff to be transparent enough for residents? More importantly, if it's such a great idea, why didn't the council have the courage to fund the pedestrian tunnel via a bonding bill? Will that courage show itself 11 days from now, when the council convenes for its annual off-site meeting? And if not, why not? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Zickert. Good evening.
Mayor Hovland, council members, and staff. My name is John Carlson. I live at 4433 Ellsworth Drive. I live there with my wife. My grandchildren are in Bloomington, so they're partly there. I question if the allocation of Edina's resources is providing the best results. Specifically, I'm concerned about crime and safety in the South Cornelia neighborhood. During the past week, I believe a car was stolen on a nearby street. A resident in the area had his wallet stolen. Couldn't the spark funds recently allocated to an already well-funded apartment building be better used by returning them to the city for use in higher priority projects? Isn't it better to allocate resources to crime prevention and safety? I look forward to your reply.
Thank you, Mr. Carlson.
Yep, just use that right as a target. Okay. Do you want it up right away? Okay. Thank you.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Thank you for this opportunity to be here tonight. Thank you, Mayor Hovland, and City Council members and City staff also. My name is Sandy Carlson. I live at 4433 Ellsworth Drive. And I'm here tonight to talk about the tree removal that occurred at the 7200 Brants Avenue site. And I want to first start out by thanking Kerry Teague. He was very good in providing information and answering some questions for me. So thank you, Kerry. Really appreciate that. This is just a picture of what has happened at that site. A lot of trees were removed that were not supposed to be removed. And I'm here tonight talking on behalf of two property owners that live at Bristol Circle, Assad Dahir and Lena Roth, who weren't able to make it tonight, but they are directly impacted by the trees that were removed at that site. I'm also here to express my concern about the tree removal. It's very disappointing for this to have happened, because we asked many, many times as a community to make sure that there was good screening from the development at that site. And so this is just a very, very big disappointment to a lot of people, and especially those who are directly impacted at the site. And what's even more concerning is that some trees on private property were taken down. And that should just never, never occur. And I just think that this is really a travesty for our neighborhood and for people who are affected at that site. This is the second time our Cornelia neighborhoods have been affected by surprises with redevelopment projects. The first was the 4040 West 70th Street building, when an additional story all of a sudden appeared on that building. It was not expected and not planned, and residents were very surprised by that. So redevelopment is really important to us, and especially when these surprises occur, it's just very, very devastating to the community. What's really deeply concerning is that really the developer went beyond their property to remove sites on private property. And I just think that is just really something that needs to be addressed. We had expressed our concern many times about the trees on that property. And this resolution that was passed by the council clearly states that those trees were to remain. And there were no qualifications made in that resolution to say that some of the trees would remain. There are just absolutely no qualifications there. And then at the November 6th council meeting, we were reassured by both the developer and city staff that the trees on the west lot line would remain. Again, there were no qualifications that some of the trees would remain. Nothing to qualify their statements. I believe that 3 actions are needed with regard to what has happened at this site and to address the situation. First, the removal of trees needs to be immediately remedied, and I know the city staff is working hard on that. Any replacement trees would need to be of sufficient size to immediately screen those private properties. Any trees placed on private property should have a warranty with them to make sure that they survive. And affected homeowners such as Assad and Lena must have approval authority of proposed remedies. So my question is, how will the homeowners and the greater neighborhood be engaged to remedy this situation? My second action is I believe there should be a penalty to the developer that goes beyond tree replacement. Developers must be held accountable for improper actions. And so my second question is, what penalties, if any, will the city impose? This developer has received everything. They've been given PUD zoning, increased height, TIF, spark, everything. And they should mind their P's and Q's and really comply with the plan. And so I do think because of everything that they've been granted by the city, that a penalty needs to be assessed on this.
Mrs. Carlson, I'm sorry, I've let you drift over your 3 minutes quite a bit, but would you mind wrapping up your comments? And then I would like to have you provide that recommended action sheet to our clerk.
Thank you, Mayor, for letting me continue. I'm almost done here. The third is to implement stricter oversight measures to ensure that the developer adheres to all project requirements. This unexpected action to remove trees contradicts prior commitments to the neighborhood and erodes trust. It's important that redevelopment projects align with the community's expectation and the promises made during public meetings. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Carlson. Yeah, I think we're all kind of curious about what happened over there, and Director Teague, it sounds like he has some knowledge of what happened. I know that I had a communication from the developer who was out of town when I sent him a text, and he was pretty surprised. He said, "I'm right on it. I'm all over it." But I don't know exactly what happened, so I don't know if you want to. Let's first see if there's anybody else in the audience that wishes to talk to the council.
Andrew Carter, 6012 Pine Grove Road. Not about any issue. I just, since I'm here, I guess, wanted to get in front of everybody and really thank everybody for, I guess, what's gone on over the past year. I've had the opportunity to attend, I think 3 city council meetings and a planning commission meeting, and I was, pleasantly surprised with what I felt like all the material had been pre-read. Genuine and practical thoughts were brought and talked about, and I was impressed. So thank you everybody for just doing what you do and making Edina a good place to live, and it feels like there's care here in the room. So that's all. I just wanted to say thanks.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for being here. Let's go online first, and then we'll go back to Director Teague on this tree issue. Pardon me?
There's someone.
There's someone else who wishes to speak? Yeah. Yes. Yeah, please come up.
Thank you, City Council and staff, for letting us speak. My name's Katie O'Day, almost a 30-year resident of Edina, Minnesota. Very proud of that. I live at 4610 Bruce Avenue, and have had just worked with the City Council on a number of different things. Have been on commissions, and it's just, this dialogue is really important to me. And so what I wanted to come and talk about was leaving public comment public. What Jennifer said at the beginning of this meeting, thanks for being part of the public process. public process. And tonight, I've learned some things that were shared by my neighbors, and things I'm interested in and want to look into. And so that would be lost if public comment went before the meeting and was no longer televised. So I strongly encourage you to allow a public process and keep community comment the way it is. Thank you.
Good. Yeah, it's nice to see you. We haven't seen you for several years, so.
Been a while.
Yeah, good.
Thank you.
And did your neighbor, Ms. Dulas, wish to comment too?
Good evening, Mayor Hovland and council members. My name is Cheryl Dulas. I live at 4609 Bruce Avenue. And I am also here to express my support for keeping community comment in its current format, public, held during council meetings, and recorded. When I learned about the proposed change, I was curious about what residents had to say during community comment. I went online and reviewed the past year of council meetings, that is 23 meetings from March 7th of last year to the most recent on February 18th. I learned quite a lot from listening firsthand to other residents' concerns. What I found was that during the year, 55 speakers made a total of 75 comments, with some speakers making comments on more than one issue. The average number of speakers per council meeting was about 2.5, with as few as 0 to as many as 5 speakers. I placed each comment into one of 6 categories. There were 2 comments of advice to the council, 4 comments made for public interest, 5 commendations to the council and/or staff, 11 complaints or grievances, 24 requests for clarification or questions about policy, and 29 suggestions to the council. Note that if a resident registered a grievance or complaint, the speaker almost always ended with a constructive suggestion for a solution. In considering the proposed protocol change, I foresee a couple of potential pitfalls. First, if the council work session runs over time, then it may necessitate shortening or eliminating community comment so that the council meeting would be able to start on time at 7 o'clock. In addition, the proposal relies on the city manager to present, secondhand, the issues brought forth by residents and may put the council at risk of further criticism for non-transparency, which was one of the top complaints. I would like to end by sharing an example that highlights the importance of public community comment process. At a council meeting this past January, 2 Edina High School students from Project Earth came to speak about the club's upcoming clothing swap and Earth Day programs. Not having a public process would have taken away the opportunity for these future leaders to observe how local governance works with citizen input, and more importantly, to participate themselves. For me, community comment serves the purpose of hearing my fellow residents share pertinent information, express concerns related to their lived experiences, and ask questions and make suggestions to improve city policies. The current format provides valuable, educational, worthwhile, and pertinent information and feedback to the council, and therefore I strongly urge the council to leave community comment the way it is. Thank you for your time and attention.
Thank you, Ms. Dulas. Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Ursula Pelka. I live on 6205 Idlewood Lane in Edina. And I just want to thank the City Council for bringing up the ordinance, the pet ordinance tonight, to ban inhumanely bred animals. I appreciate that, and I hope it will pass.
Well, thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Yeah. Anyone else in the audience wish to address the council on a matter of concern to them? All right. Anyone online?
I have no one online.
Okay. Let's Wonder if, why don't we talk to Director Teague a little bit about this tree issue, because I think all of us are curious, and last I heard, the facts hadn't sorted themselves out yet, and I was really curious, as everybody else was, I think, whether you lived in the neighborhood or you were on the council, and Ms. Carlson pointed out that element of that condition in the resolution that was passed, and I know the developer was in favor of that as well, and we all wanted to screen those neighbors, so to the extent you can provide any enlightenment on what happened, we'd appreciate it.
Yeah, certainly, Mayor, members of the council. So we're still working through the issues, but I'll tell you what I know today. So we verified, staff verified with their landscaper that they did in fact take out trees along the lot line on the 7200 France property, in addition to trees on the adjacent private properties. So that puts them in violation of the approved site plan for phase one. You recall phase one, which was the 7250 site, is the construction of the office building. But as part of phase one, they were to put in the sidewalks, landscaping that included work on the 7200 site. So they're in violation. They've removed those trees that they were supposed to save. The developer and the landscape architect have promised us submittal of a revised landscape plan by the end of the day tomorrow. So I'm hopeful we'll get that, starting with plantings on the private property in addition to 7200. The intent, and we haven't worked out the exact strategy how it's going to work, but we intend to meet with some of those neighbors, share the plan, work with the forester, maybe make some revisions to that plan. Ideally, what we'd like to do is put this on the council agenda for March 18th. The 7200 site, you recall, they still need final site plan approval. So if we can finish up with the SIPA agreements, which we think we can, they've submitted their final plans. There's no changes from preliminary, and then work out this additional landscape plan. We'd like to put this on the agenda for your discussion to review and consider that amended landscape plan and those final documents on March 18th. So that's our goal today, assuming we're going to get that landscape plan end of the day tomorrow and start working with the residents.
At one point I heard, and I don't remember who it was from, the 9 Mile Creek Watershed District Forester had a role in this thing, or our forester, and it all seemed quite confusing as to what had happened. And do you know anything about that?
Yeah, I don't believe the Watershed District has taken final action. I believe they've been meeting with them. You know, sometimes watershed districts require ponding to be larger. Maybe there's some trees removed, but I haven't heard that from the Watershed District specifically that that's the case.
So you're thinking we'll have the facts sorted out by the 18th of March, and then we'll know independently what the facts are, as well as hearing from the developer as well.
That's the goal this evening, yes.
Okay. Yeah, well, thanks for that good work on that issue. I think it was important to all of us. Okay, I'm going to go to Manager Neal now. I don't know if there's some other things we want to address in time here, but possibly.
All right, thank you, Your Honor. We had 5 questions at our previous City Council meeting in February, and I'll just go through them. First question was, how many affordable housing units created since 2015, shown in staff presentations at the February 6th HRA meeting, are permanently affordable, and how many are subject to the sunset clause? Developments that are governed by policy, by the policy version, developments that went in any particular year are guided by the policy that was in place in those particular years. I think it's worth noting that at the early years of our involvement, direct involvement in affordable housing, we didn't have as many tools. We didn't really know how to use those tools that we did have quite as effectively as we do now. Our initial period in the affordable housing policy timeframe from 2015 was an affordability period of 15 years. In 2018, the term was increased to 20 years. In 2022, the policy was amended to reflect that new developments must have an affordability period of 30 years if financing comes from the city or from the HRA. So that's where we are. That's where we are today. We're looking at 30-year timeframes. The only multifamily development required to have affordable units in perpetuity is 7200 France, and that's 15 units. And that was an agreement that we made with them bilaterally during the negotiation for the approval of their project. The 4040 flats has 118 units and an affordability period of 99 years, and that's as a result of our collaboration with the Edina Housing Foundation. They own the land and entered into a 99-year ground lease, and that is a 100% affordable development. So all of the units in that building must be affordable under the terms of their agreement. Single-family homes that are placed in the community land trust also have 99-year ground leases, and there are 18 of those homes in Edina. The next question was, the city required affordable housing units in several recent developments. What is the number of vacant affordable housing units in those developments? Stephanie Hawkinson, who manages and monitors that for the city, confirmed that their affordable units are either occupied or applications are pending for vacancies. So when somebody moves out of a unit, the owners have to pre-qualify the next folks that are going to be moving into that. So there's a time period where they're doing repair and maintenance on the building after the former tenant moved out. They're doing checks and vetting the new folks that are going to be moving in. So there is a period of vacancy, but it's as short as they can possibly make it. There aren't a bunch of affordable housing units that are just vacant in the city. I think that's the conclusion she wanted to make. Finally, the Finch will begin accepting tenant applications in March, and 7200, of course, is just starting. 7200 France is just starting. It's not quite under construction yet, but their process is starting. Next question was, why has the city not been more aggressive in requiring developers to honor their commitments to providing affordable housing units? I think I'll go back and say again that in the early years of our process, we didn't have as many tools, especially tools to compel people to provide units like we do today when we are negotiating incentive packages. We have the ability to gain better access, and we have better tools to make sure that people are complying with the commitments they made to us, including withholding payment of tax increment from projects if people are not complying. The next question was in dollars. This switches topics now. How much of the city's budget comes from the federal government? Of the city's 2025 budget, we've spent approximately $211 million for our consolidated budget this year, and 595,000 of that, less than 0.5%, is from the federal government. Of that, $428,000 is budgeted in the general fund, with the rest being community development block grant money. So $595,000 is a lot of money, but in terms of scale from the rest of our budget, it's a small piece of our budget. What will the city do if all of its federal government grants go away? We will adapt, right? It's a lot of money, but it's not so much money that we can't adapt. That adaptation will probably come in the areas where that money those federal grants were going to be applied, and that's in a variety of different areas from how we run our fleets and how we fund affordable housing, environmental improvements, things like that. So that's where we would make those changes if we had to. And that's our summary of questions from the previous meeting.
That prompt any follow-on from any of the council members? Member Risser?
Just looking at the December 19th HRA meeting and the annual compliance report, it appears only two, the Aurora and Nolan Mains, were compliant, and then Avador, Millennium, Lorient had open deficiencies. Aria, Maison Green were also non-compliant. And I think one of the things we learned in a work session about affordable housing is, well, the TIF can be used to incentivize compliance. It doesn't necessarily work Also, when we talk about placing affordable housing or specifying that it will be in perpetuity once the TIF district has been closed out, there isn't any mechanism for really ensuring that we will have those units function as affordable units. So I just wanted
Is
to,
that a statement or a question?
not a
Is there
question, but it was a
mechanism?
clarification.
No, what I mean with respect to the enforceability. You made an assertion that it's not enforceable if we have a permanent,
At the,
or did you mean that as a question?
as a comment based on the information that we received at the work session for affordable housing, it was noted, I believe that the tools for ensuring compliance are kind of lacking, and so that was an issue.
If we could respond.
I would say that could be true depending on the age at which or the year in which the city and the housing developer reached their agreement. In the early teens, 2010 to 2015, again, not very good tools to work with. But since that time, we have a more sophisticated approach, and when we use our incentives, there are better ways that we can get compliance if we need to.
Okay. Yes, Councilmember Pierce has a follow-on.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. So 2 comments, one on the compliance. So I appreciate the data in your answer, Manager Neal. I was thinking of this strictly from a compliance perspective. So it would be good to have a little bit more of a deep dive on where are we in compliant and where are we not. It's great information to know that some of the affordable housing investments that we've made are not permanent, right? And so that you just went through that detail. But I am far more interested in who's not in compliant and what's our recourse when they're not in compliance. And then the other comment I wanted to go back to with the trees, like I wanted to say something, but I wasn't quite sure what to say. And I settled on saying this: I'm not sure just replanting trees is enough. And so I want to use those 2 comments that I made, both about affordable housing and the trees, to center our ground on this statement. We definitely, as a council, we're reasonable people, right? We understand information and we make decisions, the best decisions we can with the information we have. But I think sometimes we're so cordial that, and I'm the main one, I'm extremely cordial, right? But there are some things that I think we should be irritated about. And I'm not saying we're not irritated that those 14 trees were removed, but I think sometimes we need to express that we're disappointed that that happened, and we're gonna make sure that we're gonna make it right. And I personally don't think just replanting the trees are okay. I don't know that that's enough. So I would like to offer those 2 comments.
Yeah, I would suspect that on the 18th of March, we'll have a pretty vigorous discussion on that issue.
I hope
But
so,
Manager
yeah.
Neal.
I assure you we are irritated about this, more than irritated, because we do have, this is a developer that we expect to be working with on a number of different projects over the upcoming decade probably. So this is not a good way to get this started at all. And it is annoying the way that, especially in particular, going on to adjoining private property and removing trees without permission. We just can't do that. Now, saying that, we have a fair amount of latitude to make people who harm other private property owners get them whole, right? We don't have as much latitude of being punitive to the guy that messed up. So we're talking that through about what we can do. But part of that process is a public process where developer comes and stands at that podium and says, here's what happened and here's what I'm going to do about it. So that's really what is part of what we think is going to happen on March 18th. But we're not doing nothing till March 18th. There's a lot that's going on before that, and so that meeting will be should be pretty productive.
Okay. Thank you.
Chief, I think John Carlson raised the issue of a couple of public safety related issues, a couple of criminal incidents that occurred over in the South Cornelia neighborhood, and it was concerned about the level of policing that's going on. And I don't know if you can share any information at this point in time about these two incidents that he referenced, or it's under investigation.
Yeah, Mayor, council members, I don't have the details on exactly what happened there, but we'll look into it and have a response back and some follow-up on what occurred there.
Okay, good. Thanks for that. And then, Carrie Teague, back to you. One of the things that Sandy Carlson was concerned about from a disappointment standpoint, I think she said, was that an extra story occurred on 4040 France Avenue than what I assume she said, she meant what was approved. So is 4040 any different than what was approved as constructed?
There was not an extra story added to what was approved. There was some shifting of area within that top level that fell within the city's administrative ability to approve what was classified as a minor change, but they didn't add an additional story.
And then she was concerned that the developer was receiving all kinds of benefits, including TIF, but we don't, my understanding is, and our long practice is, we don't provide developers with TIF assistance. We provide assistance using TIF when we have public elements of a project that we want to see fulfilled. Is that correct?
As far as the TIF dollars going toward public improvements within the development, I think that's what you're...
Thank you. Okay. And I think we can look at those other issues that we can address those by the end of the week online, and then we'll address them as well. Katie O'Day and Cheryl Dulas, their comments on the community comment format being kept in its present mode, I guess would be one way to put it. We can discuss that. We haven't set anything up on for a discussion on that. We have your ideas. Member Jackson raised this issue of what are the other options, or what about public comment? I joined in that curiosity, I guess, without ever making any kind of a commitment to change it. We just wanted to know what were the different options that were out there with respect to community comment, and you drilled down on some of that and came back with a recommendation, but we haven't made any decision on that. And I wonder if maybe we can talk about that when we get to concerns of council and decide when we want to address that issue, because there continues to be email dialogue about that, the method by which we take public comment. So, okay, that's it. Let's move on then. And we've got a consent agenda in front of us, and there's a few items that council members have indicated they wish to remove from the consent agenda. One is 6.8, 6.15, and then 6.16 as well. So with the exception of 6.8, 6.15, and 6.16, is there a motion to approve the balance of the items on the consent agenda in a single motion?
So moved.
Second.
Member Jackson moves, Member Pierce seconds the adoption of the items on the consent agenda with the exception of items 6.8, 6.15, and 6.16. Any further discussion? All those in favor of adoption of those items on the consent agenda with the exception of items 6.8, 6.15, and 6.16, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Carried. The items on the consent agenda are adopted as indicated, and we will now take up item 6.8, which was a concern of actually three of us, Julie Risser, Councilmember Risser, Councilmember Agnew, and the mayor. All have been getting email dialogue and having correspondence with both residents in the neighborhood over there, as well as people who have kids parking over there in that area. So I think a better understanding of that would be important. Member Risser, do you want to go first with your concerns?
My concern involves the signage that is in the parking lot next to the soccer field. And I don't know if we want to pull up the specific language of the traffic item. I believe it's 1A, but it's the signage, and I drove over there and looked at it, and I believe it says that nobody can park there from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. during school days, which made me wonder, first off, why would we do that? And are there other examples of parking lots within the city of Edina where we have that stipulation? There is a trail. You can actually access the 9 Mile Creek Trail and go hiking. So that means anybody, who wants to go and use that trail can't use that trail. The other thing is there has been this incredible emphasis on trying to make parking spaces more used in Edina. And, we put in a pedestrian bridge so that it would go to the upper deck of the municipal parking ramp. So we've invested in that. We factored in a very innovative parking plan for the 7200, 7250 France Avenue project. We discussed allowing Starling to use the parking lot at City Hall, which I think that is not happening, but it was a discussion that happened. And so there seems to be this emphasis on trying to get more people being able to access the parking that we have so that we can keep cars off the street. And so I'm wondering, why are we taking a very different tact for this particular parking lot? And that is really the essence of my concern.
Let's hear Member Agnew's concerns as well.
I would echo, but just say, more curiosity into whether the park nearby, if that is an option, and wanting to understand more about how that came into the decision-making process and at what point we put up those signs. So just looking for more information and maybe just more dialogue in general. I know maybe this is even an opportunity to talk with the school board as well, but making sure that around schools we are taking parking into account kind of in that holistic kind of way. So I was just hoping to have it be a broader conversation, looking to learn a little bit more than what was provided on the transportation report and conversation at the Transportation Commission.
Thanks for those comments. Member Pierce.
This definitely is, in my opinion, kind of a broader, kind of complex issue. So in that area, there's a couple of things that occur. One, there's not enough parking for students at the school. And so the public schools, high schools, then have two agreements that people can pay for a permit to park at two of the churches, right? And then if they're not parking in one of those areas, then what ends up happening is the students will park on the streets. And so there's streets over there where we have signage that says you can't park. There's another area, there's a cul-de-sac where parents pull up and wait, right? And so that gets dangerous there as well. And so students are parking at the park because there's no place else to park unless they park on the street. And so, and then we got complaints, rightfully so, from homeowners saying, well, it's dangerous because there's so many cars parked on the streets. And so this was one where I'm not sure how, right, to solve it because there's a lot of complexities that are compounding this particular issue.
Member Jackson.
Yes, so I want to put in one other perspective, and that is, I looked at the parking ordinance, and it said sort of for city parks and the parking lots there, it's a case-by-case basis. So for me, the question is, what's the public safety purpose of banning kids from parking in this parking lot during school hours, or banning anybody. So just the general public, and as Member Risser said, there's a trailhead there. You can't park during school hours, and I just want to know what the public purpose of banning that is.
Yeah, okay, all good comments. I think our mindset is fairly uniform, and our curiosities are pretty much the same. I know the neighbors have been very pleased with the temporary restrictions that have been put up over there, but some of the photographs I've seen, even after the temporary restrictions were put in place, there's still a lot of cars parking on the street. And I think that I heard at least one vehicle that was ticketed for parking in the parking lot where it says no parking. And so to the point you're making, what's the purpose of that? I mean, it's a public parking lot. We banned parking in there. Member Risser points out it's connected to the trailhead. Once you get, if you use that access point and there's another sort of homemade trail that the kids have used to get up to the school parking lot, it seems to me that we should take pressure off, or think about taking pressure off the streets further by letting them use that parking lot and probably plowing it. Maybe that's the reason it was never set up for parking, was because we weren't plowing it. I'm not sure, but I don't know. Manager Neal, you have any insight on this issue? Oh.
If I could just add one thing before Director Milner talks. The only other question I had, which perhaps you can answer this, if we allow kids to park there, my other question was, are we impeding other residents who might want to park there in order to use the trail? And so I would feel differently about it if we looked at kind of peak traffic patterns and find out that all the parking spots are full and we've got people who are trying to go utilize the park and they have no place to do that. And so that was the only other thought that I had. But if we're in a situation where everybody can use the park, and that would probably be how I would lean, because it is a public parking spot, but that parking lot. But that was the only question I still had.
Well, what was Sharon's estimate for the meeting this evening? Because we can talk a long time on this one. Let's go back to when the high school was expanding. 8-10 years ago, they did a traffic study and a parking study. We heard from the neighbors that if the school expands, there's not going to be parking. So we met with the parking people at that time. There is concerns with how many people and how many permits they can give. They start with seniors, juniors, and then sophomores are as there's permits left. And then you got the 2 lots that they rent out. And Chapel, the neighborhood to the south, the residents there, was a big public engagement with the neighbors on Creek Valley, Chapel, and Chapel or Creek View on each side, right? And nobody wanted people parking. The school, the city shouldn't provide street parking for the school. They should handle their parking themselves. So we addressed the parking in the south neighborhood right away and did 2-sided, no parking 8 to 4. And we've had one complaint from somebody that would like to have tea and parties at lunchtime, and she can't do that now. And we've said, well, the neighborhood spoke then and didn't want it. And this area in that study was identified as a future thing that we should consider as necessary. Well, COVID hit, less kids are even on the bus, more people are driving their kids or letting them drive. So we saw this issue get worse with the pandemic. And now they were squirting out into this neighborhood recently, and neighbors called and said, there's a problem, there's safety concerns. Traffic Safety Committee reviewed it. We reviewed the study from 2016 and said this was an area we identified. So then we re-signed this and said you can't park in the streets because of various concerns of the neighbors, and you guys got all those emails and messages about the concerns. The parking lot itself, that is a city parking lot, we don't maintain it. So in the wintertime, the snow is not plowed. So we don't want people in there because we don't maintain it. You guys could tell us otherwise, but that is our practice right now. I'd be concerned about making a de facto parking lot for the schools when they're supposed to handle their own parking, but that could be a thing that you guys address. And I'd almost be concerned, your last question of if we make it available, I think it's going to fill up and there won't be any access for people using the trail in that regard. But we don't know that because we just made these changes, so now these people are looking for areas. Many times we hear from students too that they don't get permits because they can't get out of that lot fast enough to get to their activities after school. So they'd rather park somewhere like this and walk so they can get to their activities in other areas. So that's a very brief kind of background, and we'd happy to answer any of the questions or any clarifying questions of the council.
How many parking stalls are there in the parking lot?
The park, I would have to find that out. I don't know right offhand.
Member Agnew?
My question is, did we evaluate one-sided parking restrictions?
Well, again, then you'd have potentially some of the same concerns from the residents. It could or could not be a safety concern, right? So we didn't. We went right to the two-sided. We said, if we're going to do it, we're going to match Chapel, because that's what the neighborhood said. Either you restrict it on both sides or you don't do it at all, so we matched that. So I can say, no, we didn't consider one-sided.
Thank you.
Member Jackson?
So, and Mr. Mayor, you can help me remember this. I don't know if it was in the school city committee conversation we had that, or as a city council, but we have talked about how we can manage, what we can do about traffic flow at the high school, because it is atrocious. It's really bad. And I don't know, you know, if we had ever think about scheduling a conversation with them, how we can fix that, because it's, you know, I've tried to go to events at the high school and I just, you know, can't get in and out. And that's during the day. And I know that for the students leaving, it just does take forever to get out of there.
You know, my recollection is that we've looked at the issue over time. The school district is, you know, putting traffic control people out there, I think at least in the afternoon, maybe in the morning too.
They do both. They manage traffic, and I think they're doing as well as they can for the site constraints.
And we thought about some improvements, sort of physical improvements to the roadway, but it wouldn't have mattered, I don't think, in terms of the volume.
It's just too many.
Because the volume is so significant that it's just overwhelming, to your point, Member Jackson. So what do this is a recommendation to do the same thing on the west side that we did on the east side of the school, basically, on Creek Valley and Chapel.
Correct. We're recommending two-sided restrictions, 8 to 4. I think the parking lot is a different conversation or a separate conversation. Tonight, we're just wanting you to approve the traffic safety with those parking restrictions on the streets. We could continue the parking on the parking lot at another date if that is to the council's
I would
wishes.
tend to think the heaviest volume of traffic for people that want to use the trail would be when school's out, summertime. But I'm sure there's some people that want to use it during the wintertime too, and I agree with you. I think that lot would fill up right away. And then kids would be jockeying over there because they don't have to pay.
Correct.
Right.
So it's quite an interesting problem.
Go ahead. Sorry, I do appreciate Member Jackson's point about looking at traffic patterns. I think I'm the only one up here who does this every day. I mean, it's dangerous, and I'm part of the issue when I'm picking up my kid and I'm hitting a U-turn right in the traffic. But, I mean, 10 cars will do that every day because if you go in that parking lot and my daughter's got to get to dance by 5, school lets out at 4, if I go in that parking lot, she's going to miss dance because I can't get out. And so a lot of people either go to that cul-de-sac and just kind of hang out there. We've got signage beside the church where you can't do that. But it's a huge challenge. And I think it's probably smart to think about how we might be able to help look at traffic patterns. And I don't know what we can do, but that seems like a strategic thing that has nothing to do with this ask tonight. But it seems like it'd be a smart thing to consider doing.
Manager Neal.
Thank you, Your Honor. Yes, we've had many conversations with the school district, with our school district peers over the years on Valley View and how to properly design and access it. We've done some design work ourselves that we've shared with them from time to time on some options. It just doesn't get to the top of the district's list of capital investments, but we can certainly continue to do that, and because we've got some history.
The other thing that would be worthwhile would, Member Agnew, go ahead.
I'll assume, Mayor, that we are going to say the same thing. So what if we opened up the parking lot for parking, had like little signs that was like for 3 to 5 spaces, whatever number it is, and we can be flexible on that over time, of like reserved for park use. And then we could sell permits for the rest of them and make some money as a city. There we go.
We'll take it under
Member Agnew
consideration.
was much more aggressive than I was going to be about it. I was just going to say, why don't you look at the parking lot and see if that holds any possibilities here.
Well, I think
Keeping in mind now, Member Agnew's creative ideas about us being in the parking lot business too.
Well, it just raises more questions for operation and maintenance. Are we plowing it? That's a whole nother thing we haven't been doing. Who's going to plow it? How are we going to manage it? So
That goes to her point about paying to park there. That would be a source of funds to pay for the maintenance of it. Anyway.
So I think we can take that back and have an internal discussion. And
I mean, we do sell parking options for 50th and France parking ramp spots. So we do a little. We've got some experience doing this. The more complex we make it, the harder it is to enforce, right? So that's one thing we've got to consider.
I would also like to, and I'm comfortable. I know that there are already signs up there today restricting parking on both sides of the street, but I would like to come back and have another conversation about the inherent differential between safety of one-sided, no-sided, two-sided parking. One, for this use case in particular, but I think as we're making some of these, as we're talking later, broader parking decisions and discussions around the community, when I hear we're going to, eliminate parking on both sides of the street due to safety concerns, I want more data behind that, and I want to understand more about what that means, because if it's really that unsafe, then we shouldn't allow parking on any street, right? Like that's the hyperbolic reaction that I might have, but it's where I want to understand more of the data. I want to understand what safety issues have occurred, and could we still combat some of the concerns of neighbors by restricting on one side of the street? I just think it warrants a conversation.
Yep, and I can say the one thing here is there's no sidewalks, so kids of all ages are walking in the street with cars on both sides and cars trying to get through, and not just adults. These are high schoolers driving through with many kids walking. So that was one of the major concerns.
And I add, in that, I agree with doing that analysis. The other challenge, though, in this case, was the volume of cars parked on the street. And so if it was, 3 or 4 cars here or there, that would be different. But in this case, I mean, it's lining the streets on both sides, right?
When you're talking about driver behavior amongst kids, it made me think about last winter. I remember seeing a sign in the neighborhood. That sign we see that says, "Drive like your kids lived here." Yeah. And the snow had covered up kids live here. So it said, "Drive like your kids." That's all you could see was "Drive like your kids." Oh, yeah. Well, that's the most time we've ever spent on the traffic safety report. I think it's a new record, but interesting issue. Is there a motion to adopt the traffic safety report of January 28th, 2025?
So moved.
Second.
Member Pierce moves, Member Jackson seconds the adoption of the traffic safety report of January 28th, 2025. Any further discussion? All those in favor of adoption of the traffic safety report of January 28th, 2025, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Carried. The traffic safety report of January 28, 2025 is adopted. Let's go then to 6.15, which was a request for purchase, and I think Director Milner has this as well. It's the Highway 100 interchange project that we have coming up next year, and the need to remove some trees. And yeah, Julie had this, and she may have questions to start out the conversation.
And I'll try to keep this brief, but basically when I look at the purchase report and I see that the scope of the project are trees located along Highway 100 near City Hall, adjacent to the northbound Highway 100 on-ramp, around both the Highway 100 and Vernon Avenue bridges and near the CPKC railroad tracks. And I also see the funding sources grants, MSA, county utility packs, and other. And so I think I understand what this project is, but then I go to the contract, and the contract says that this is about not removing 4 trees near 4901 Hawthorne Court, which is on the opposite side of Highway 100 near the southbound exit ramp. And that the idea is the owners are donating the trees to the city. The city is going to be responsible for moving the trees. And partly because of the budget and everything, I was thinking, what is this going to cost? I got a figure of it'll be $4,000 to $5,000 to remove all 4 trees. And then my other concern was I don't want the city to have to pay for this. I was told that we would be reimbursed by the county or the state, but I'm wondering, why would the county or the state reimburse us for something that is what appears to be purely a municipal project, removing trees from a private home and putting them elsewhere in the city? So those are my questions and concerns.
Thank you, Member Risser. So the contract documents are 5 pages of tree removals. The contractor bid on tree removals in the areas you mentioned, but also those 4 trees behind the wall, because that whole wall is coming down in a temporary condition. After they submitted their quotes, the owners of that parcel said, we want to donate these 4 trees. So we pulled that from the contract. So in that contract, it says, you must follow all bid documents, the 6 pages, but please just remove these 4 trees. We just wanted to document those 4 trees. So they are corresponding and relevant. The funding sources, it's a estimated $27 million project with 12 funding sources. If you go back to the August 7th council meeting, I provided the council an update. Municipal state aid, county state aid, there's water fund, sanitary fund, storm sewer utilities, PACs, general, a lot of different in-kind, MnDOT. We got a new LLP grant since that time, and we're still asking for state bonding. We're going to hold all the contracts, but all the other parties are going to pay us as construction happens. Plus, there's $11.2 million of federal grants as part of this project. So the city's going to hold all contracts. County's going to pay us their share of federal grants. They're going to pay us their county state aid. We're using our municipal funds, our local funds for our own water and sewer systems, a couple more grants, and we'll be reviewing this in great detail, most likely April 16th after we open bids on the much larger and the entire project for this year.
So the city is not going to get stuck with this bill?
No, there's a 3-party cooperative agreement that is part of all of this. Yep.
Thank you.
So the trees that you're going to move that Member Risser was concerned about are going to be moved to some other location?
The city forester is thinking Todd Park.
They can safely transplant those trees?
These 4 trees went in when that apartment building was built just a few years ago. So they're coniferous trees, 8 to 15 feet. They're perfect for transplanting. They just didn't want them cut down and taken away.
Yeah.
And they said, hey, does the city want them? And the city forester said, yeah, I could use those 4 at Todd Park. So let's use them as we can, salvage them.
That federal grant you talked about, do we have an executed contract on that federal grant?
Yep.
Okay, that's good. I'll talk about that later, what we talked about at the U.S. Conference of Mayors meeting. And then the other thing I was concerned about was making sure that we don't take any more trees than are absolutely necessary, because there's some, on all the ramps, not all the ramps, I guess, if you think about. So which ramps are we talking about? I guess that's a better way to start the dialogue.
Sure. There's probably trees you don't even notice are out there on all 4 corners of both bridges that have grown up, and they're just volunteer trees over time. New bridges, we got to clear those trees out to make space. There's also a few down by the railroad to make space for that new Vernon Bridge. There's a few in the redundant ramps right here just west of Grange. Some of those are staying, but there's some where that new ramp's going straight to 50th that needs to be removed. And then there's a few along the northbound on-ramp for the new noise wall. Remember, the neighborhood wanted that noise wall for years and years. That wall has to be up at the top of the hill. on MnDOT property, and a few of those trees at the top need to be taken to make room for the noise wall.
Some of those larger, older trees?
At the top of the hill, but it's not on private property, it's all in MnDOT right away.
Right.
The oak trees, that was a question we had from Member Jackson. These oak trees out here are not getting touched on the east side of Grange.
So as part of the project then, would the sound wall be extended down that berm northbound on that exit, that entrance ramp on the northbound 100?
It's starting from the Minnehaha Creek, where it ends today, right at the creek,
Yep.
and going all the way up to
All the way up.
50th. Yep,
Okay,
correct.
yeah, that's great.
Yep.
Yeah, okay, it should have been done years ago, but yeah, that's great. Other questions, Member Risser?
No.
On that, okay. Do you want to move that matter?
So moved.
All right. Member Risser moves, Member Pierce seconds the approval of the request for purchase for the Highway 100 interchange project tree removals. Any further discussion? All those in favor of adoption of the motion as stated, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed? Aye. Carried. 6.15 is adopted. 6.16, Resolution 2025-19, deals with what's called the West Metro Multi-Community Wellhead Protection Plan, Part 1. I just wanted folks to understand a little bit, and myself included, about this whole concept around wellhead protection. And I thought you could address that a little bit for us.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. So typically, agencies approve each individual wellhead protection plan independent of other agencies. Well, we know the aquifers don't know municipal boundaries. So there's some conflicting information sometimes between agencies. So the Department of Health, Met Council said, let's try a pilot program with some 8 communities in the western suburbs. So they've been working with us and 7 other communities to do this phase 1 wellhead protection plan as an area. So let's first delineate what area that would be, and then do a vulnerability assessment of where we all get our groundwater for our wells and our treatment plants. So that's been completed. Phase 2 is now to develop goals and strategies and objectives of how to manage potential sources of contamination, because we want to keep protect the wellhead, protect the aquifers. So this resolution tonight is so the Minnesota Department of Health can ensure all communities are on the same page. They're asking for each community to approve this so we can move into phase 2 and continue that work as a broader area than just individual cities. So there'll be an opportunity for more engagement and public hearing, I understand, back with this council later this year.
Okay. So it's a new strategy around protecting groundwater, and we're part of the pilot project.
Correct, yeah.
Okay.
It's a great project.
Somebody care to move the adoption of that resolution?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, Member Jackson moves, Member Pierce seconds the adoption of Resolution 2025-19, which is the West Metro Multi-Community Wellhead Project Protection Plan, Part 1. Any further discussion? All those in favor of adoption of Resolution 2025-19 say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Carried. Resolution 2025-19 is adopted. And that takes care of the consent agenda. Thanks, folks. And now we're going to have a presentation in the special recognitions and presentations portion of the agenda. Nick Baller, our traffic safety coordinator, is here and is going to give us his annual traffic safety summary report, and this is for 2024. Mr. Baller, welcome. Good to see you again.
Thank you, Mayor and members of council. I'll get this pulled up here. All right, again, good evening, Mayor, members of council. Again, my name is Nick Baller. I'm the traffic safety coordinator here for the city of Edina. I'll be going through my 2024 traffic safety summary report. And in this report, I'll be going over some statistics and trends kind of throughout the city from last year, but also I'll do a little overview of the last handful of years to see kind of how we have been receiving these requests. A quick summary of how a traffic safety request works is once a request is submitted to myself by a resident, commuter, any type of stakeholder throughout the city, I'm able to collect what their issue is, what they're looking for in that request, and depending on what information we have available, we do a traffic study, we analyze what information we need, and then we discuss it with our traffic safety committee, as you all mentioned here earlier. That committee makes a recommendation based on that information found, based on policies from a city, county, or state level. And this recommendation gets then brought to the Transportation Commission for comments as well. Following Transportation Commission, it comes here for council for final approval, comments, as you've done here earlier this evening. And throughout this whole process, I'm remaining in communication with these requesters so that they know that they can be involved in this public process as it proceeds. When a request is received, it's put into one of these 5 categories, which is parking and signage, intersection control, traffic calming, pedestrian safety, and then anything that doesn't fall into those first 4 categories is other. A couple examples of those are a lot of sightline concerns, as you see in this image here. Also maybe lane striping concerns as well. So in 2024, there were 202 requests that were submitted. Any request can be submitted by contacting me by phone, through the mail. I get plenty by email, the city's website, and the Edina 311 app. There were 147 requests that were reviewed by this traffic safety committee and eventually adopted here by council. Intersection control received 39 there were 147 reviewed. Intersection control had 39 total reviewed items, followed by by pedestrian safety at 35 reviewed requests. Then we have parking and signage at 28. Traffic calming was 23, and all others were 22. Of those 147, 44 requests were received in prior years. Those were reviewed because of whether it was weather determined when a traffic study could be conducted. If someone's looking for a crosswalk in the middle of winter, we want to analyze it when more people are outside. So of those 147 items that were reviewed, we had 19 A items, and those are items where staff recommends action out of them. There were 11 items that were parking and signage where we did recommend changes, and an example of those is just outside here along Wilson Road, following the Mason Green and Starling restaurant opening, where we restricted parking on the east side of the street to allow one-sided parking still have the traffic flow through there. There were 4 approved traffic safety items. One example is an approved crosswalk going in along those Braemar trails along Braemar Boulevard there, where the trails kind of connect. There were 3 approved other requests, along with 2 of intersection control. So one example here is West 60th Street at Oaklawn Avenue. That's the entrance of one of those parking lots at Pamela Park. We moved from a 2-way stop control to an all-way stop control. And then there was also 1 traffic calming approval as well. There were 25 B items. That's where staff recommends no action based on the information that they've received. And there were 88 D items, which are items handled solely by myself, the traffic safety coordinator. An example of those are where a request for maybe a traffic signal, stop sign, crosswalk, and following a review of data or a traffic study, data was so low where it didn't really consider full review from all of staff that was necessary in order for those warrants or policies that we have in place. There are C items as well, and those are items that staff does review and they do have information on, but they still need more information in order for any recommendation to be made at that time. But a C item eventually becomes a B, or D item as it proceeds. When we look at requests kind of throughout the city, we like to break them down by quadrants, and in the northwest quadrant here in Edina, we received 54 requests, which was an increase of 8 from 2023. The highest number of requests here were other, because a lot of these requests were submitted through the Edina 311 app, and those who were submitting them didn't know how to submit what their request was, because a lot of these concerns were within that Grandview area, as you can see, because a lot of them had to deal with the 50th Street reconstruction project that just took place this last year, along with a few other concerns along whether it's Benton Avenue and also Tracy Avenue as you proceed south towards Highway 62. In Southwest Edina, we had 33 requests that were received, which ended up being 2 less than in 2023. Pedestrian safety was the highest level of concern here based on the number of requests at 8. And a lot of those are areas where we're crossing busier streets, such as Valley View Road, Dewey Hill, and a lot of those areas are when people are trying to get onto sidewalks or they're trying to get into local parks. In Southeast Edina, we received 38 requests, which was one more from 2023. Pedestrian safety was the highest number of requests received here as well. And a lot of these requests were along a lot of Hennepin County roadways, so whether that's York and Xerxes Avenue, and also France Avenue as well. West 66th Street is kind of a common location that we received traffic calming issues, because of people coming down that highway or coming down the hill from Highway 100 traveling eastbound. In Northeast Edina, we received 77 total requests, so this is always the quadrant that we receive the most requests by far. It's the most dense quadrant of the city as well in the sense of commuters, and a lot of these requests were based around the Metro Transit E-Line project that led to a lot of single lane closures on France, which led to people finding their own detours, whether it's through the Chowan Park neighborhood or along the Pamela Park neighborhood too. As you can see, Wooddale Avenue had a lot of concerns, around 57th Street and kind of going south. And you can also see just right outside of City Hall here, there are a lot of parking and also pedestrian concerns here because of that, the Starling and Mason Green development. So when we look at requests received throughout the year, we almost always see this type of bell curve where requests increase in these summer months, and I'm sure your eyes first go to the highest 2 months of requests received both in June and September, and a lot of those are because of traffic patterns are shifting, school is being let out for the summer, or it's starting back up again in the fall months, and that's also when we're seeing issues with street projects are getting more underway, closures are shifting as well, so people kind of don't really know what to expect based on what they're used to. Also in the colors orange for traffic calming and blue for pedestrian safety, those two numbers kind of tend to peak together in the sense of people are going faster, I feel less safe as a pedestrian. So sometimes correlating those can be a little different for how I receive them. Now, when we look at requests by category throughout the last 5 years, we're starting to see a trend. So all of traffic calming, intersection control, pedestrian safety, and other, they are all increasing over the last handful of years, with only parking and signage kind of having that slight dip compared to the last few years. And I'd just like to say thank you for your time here, and I'm open for questions if anyone has anything.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Baller, for that annual report. Questions for Mr. Baller, comments on the work he's been doing with the Traffic Safety Committee? Yes, Councilmember Jackson.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So if you could go back to those bar charts, the pedestrian safety, that's really interesting. And in the last 2 years has really gone up. No. Yeah, that's where you want. Can you tell us, just fill that in a little bit more, give a little color as to why you think it's gone up so dramatically?
Yeah, that's a great question. So one reason why a lot of pedestrian safety requests are going up is we're developing a lot more more sidewalks. We're filling out our system there, but also residents are learning how to submit these requests, and a lot of them are wanting added facilities at crosswalks. So if you see a standard crosswalk, people might think that's not enough for what their level of safety needs, so they might be looking for flashers, or they may be looking for something else to add on top of that. So we're making it easier for people to submit these requests, which is great. And I think people are just noticing when they're out and about, hey, I can take a quick picture, submit this on my phone, I'll be done in 2 minutes. And then that's where it comes to me, and we can see if those added facilities meet what our policy stands for.
So if you were to correlate these numbers with the use of 311, Edina 311, that would be a pretty close correlation.
I would believe so, yeah, because a lot of people, when they're out and about, it's much easier to take out your phone, submit those while you're walking into where you're going, as opposed to if you're driving through and someone doesn't stop at a stop sign, maybe you're not able to think of going on your phone while you're still commuting at that time. But yeah, that would be a great assumption.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions, comments? You know, it seems like, I'm looking at the traffic calming section, and the requests around traffic calming have almost doubled in a year. And I think we've had that reflected in comments we've had and conversations we've had with our fellow residents and things we've observed ourselves about. People seem to be driving faster than they were before, and more aggressively and more in a hurry. And that, of course, equates with creating a lot of safety-related issues. So what are you hearing or seeing around that issue of traffic calming?
That's a great question, Mayor Hovland. I think kind of part of it is almost how you brought the question up is it might seem like people are going a lot faster, especially because a lot of our street reconstruction projects, we're completing these projects and now we're narrowing roadways. So when cars are driving by with these more narrow roadways, it might feel like people are driving faster when you are nearby or crossing another vehicle. Also, we have a lot of projects that have been happening the last handful of years, so a lot of people have been finding their own detoured routes, and because of that, volumes increase, speeds increase, because people are trying to make up for that lost time detouring in their own way, that they might be speeding a little bit faster, and that's why we're trying to utilize different help from whether it's police or other kind of ways to help for that kind of temporary issue.
The other thing, Director Milner may have some input on this, but when I look at the fact that requests in 2024 were down over 2023 around intersection control, it makes me think of, I think he's told us that we're about halfway through our street reconstruction process. And as we've narrowed streets and I think, tightened up intersections, I wonder if that hasn't had the intended effect of creating a safer environment for everybody. And thus, we're seeing less concerns about intersection control. Do you have any, is that just supposition on my part, or are you seeing any hard evidence on that?
Yeah, that's a good question too. I think it also can be kind of, as I've been practicing this for now 6 or 7 years, I might be doing a better job at asking you why someone is looking for a stop sign. Is it because you're trying to use the intersection as a pedestrian more? Okay, well maybe you're looking for increased pedestrian facilities of some sort. So how I'm taking those requests might be shifting just a little bit one way or another, because I think I am improving on that, how I'm taking that information in. So that could also be another reason as well.
Did that prompt anything further from council members? All right, well, yeah, thanks for being here, and keep up the good work. It's an important position that you have. Responsibility is significant, so thanks for keeping people safe.
Thank you, Mayor.
Yeah.
Members of council, I appreciate it.
I know you work hard at it, so we appreciate it. Well, we've got one other matter in this portion of the agenda, and we've got Addison Lewis with us, our Community Development Coordinator, who's going to introduce the topic, and we've got David Alkire here with us that many of us know well, and welcome him. And I see Ryan Days here as well from the Planning Commission to make a presentation on something that they've been working on that is kind of complicated. And interested in hearing your observations on this matter. Mr. Lewis, go ahead.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. So tonight, Commissioner Alkire is here to present the Planning Commission's work plan item on the topic of parking. In 2024, the Commission was asked to consider the future of parking in Edina and identify parking initiatives to pursue in the next 10 to 15 years, in what order and what Commission's resources should be assigned to each. Planning Commission was the lead for this item, but the ETC and EEC were also asked to review and comment, so their comments are included in the staff report. The recommendation for you tonight is simply to accept the advisory communication and refer the report to staff. And what that means is when we're developing work plans in the future, we would look to incorporate this work where there's good opportunities. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to David, and he will present the recommendations.
Thank you.
Thank you, Addison. Mayor, members of council, staff.
Commissioner, welcome, both of you.
Oh, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. Parking is complicated, but luckily it's so fascinating that it'll keep us interested tonight. On behalf of Commissioner Day and Commissioner Hahnemann, who worked on this, on behalf of the Planning Commission, I'm happy to share the results of our work in 2024 on initiative number 4 in the 2024 work plan. I'll read the text just to get us grounded. Consideration of future of parking in Edina to identify parking initiatives to pursue in the next 10 to 15 years. I want to be real clear about scope. It says identify parking initiatives to pursue. So what you will get in this document, in this work, is not specific policy recommendations, not specific ordinance recommendations. What you will get is specific recommendations for areas of inquiry or evaluation. So I think the best analogy to think about is we're writing the menu, we're not actually cooking the food. So we're making a plan for the next 10 years of what we as a city should be paying attention to. Edina's vision for the future is documented in adopted plans like the Comprehensive Plan and the Climate Action Plan and the Living Streets Plan, and that's where we looked for insight into parking opportunities in our city. We identified 9 themes from the documents that we reviewed, and they're listed on the left side of the page. The only one I think that might be a little non-intuitive is number 5, which deals with increasing tree planting. I guess I would just emphasize that it's widely reported that we have more than 1 billion parking spaces in the United States, and that we have more square footage dedicated to the storage of cars than to the housing of people. So parking, whether it's off-street or on-street, is a huge land use issue, and it crowds out all kinds of things, in addition or including trees. So from the themes, we took the parking insights and grouped and combined them into 4 project opportunities that are listed on the right side of the page here. A parking inventory or audit, which we'll talk about, an update to the off-street parking ordinance, to create a new on-street parking plan, and to create a district parking plan. And I'll talk about each one of these briefly this evening. A parking audit or a parking inventory is basically a quantitative view of the status quo that identifies surplus and shortage by commercial node. It's basically a good place to start when you're trying to figure out what the situation is in any city. So, for example, a few years ago, we were talking about the U.S. Bank project on France Avenue. I think it was 7025 France. And part of that project included a parking ramp, and there was some discussion at Planning Commission and also at City Council about whether Southdale, was actually overparked or underparked. Doing a good quality parking audit can help answer those questions ahead of time, so that as we go into new projects in the future, we'll have a better sense of what the real needs in that commercial node are. Because it involves off-street parking and on-street parking, it would be a joint project by the Planning Commission and by Transportation. The second initiative is an update of the 2022 off-street parking ordinance. You'll recall that we updated the off-street parking ordinance in 2022 after almost 50 years, I think, of having the same parking ordinance. Tremendous amount of work went into that. Our view is that by the time this particular piece of the recommendations comes up in 2028, that'll be 6 years after the 2022 ordinance was adopted, and there'll be some opportunities for further improvements to our off-street parking ordinance. I'll just mention or highlight a couple of the areas for inquiry that are listed on the page here. First, to look at reducing commercial minimums given the environmental changes in commercial real estate. Second, to update incentives near transit. We already have in our code an incentive for 10% reduction in off-street parking minimums if it's within a quarter mile of a transit facility. That's great, but maybe there should be a different parking incentive for within 500 feet of a transit facility. So there may be some opportunities for us to improve that. Next one I'd highlight is to update the EV parking standards in our city. There'll be some guidance coming from the state in 2026 about that, so when we go through this project in 2028, that'll be a good chance to make sure that we are meeting the state guidance and also maybe improving on that. Finally, we'd recommend to update surface parking standards. Surface parking is not the most popular land use, but in a community like ours, it's necessary, and there are better and worse ways of doing it. And there would be a good opportunity for a comprehensive look at how we design surface parking in our city. The third initiative would be on-street parking, and this would be to create a new on-street parking plan as a tool for planners. It would be informed by the parking audit. It would be a joint effort by the Transportation Commission and the Energy and Environment Commission. And the key things to look at in this department would be specific goals for the replacement of on-street parking with bike and ped facilities, street trees, green spaces, transit access, and other productive uses, especially where district parking is available like 50th in France. A second opportunity would be to evaluate specific goals for one-side no parking on select streets and residential zones to create bike facilities. And a third opportunity to highlight would be specific goals for strategic use of one-way traffic in our city to create space for bike facilities while preserving parking. The fourth and final would be district parking plan. District parking can be an effective tool in creating walkable nodes in a car-based community. It's really hard to do in a fully developed city like ours. We have three really good ones. We have France and 50th, we have Grandview, and we have a new district parking facility, small but new, at 44th in France. It's hard to do, but we're going to improve our chances if we plan ahead for where we as a city would like to have district parking developed. So, for example, 70th and Cahill is going to be redeveloped someday. I don't know when, but someday it will be. And we'll have a good head start if we have an intentional plan to create district parking in that area. This is because it's principally a land use job. This would be something that would be assigned to the Planning Commission. Our schedule goes like this. This is our recommended schedule for these 4 project activities. You'll see that it's iterative. It goes through one cycle and then waits for some implementation time, and then it goes through another cycle. It's iterative because parking is an ecosystem. Off-street parking influences on-street parking and vice versa, and both of them are influenced by what's happening in the environment. So you're never really done with it. It's something that has to be looked at over and over again in the life of a city. We know that this will be difficult to accomplish because particularly in the last part of this decade, parking will be competing for resources with other important things that the city is involved with, particularly the comprehensive plan. But it's something that we'll have to negotiate and work through together as we proceed. Also wanted to mention specifically that the comprehensive plan has an item in it, the climate action plan has an item in it that specifically calls for new pricing models in Edina. So perhaps paid parking, different ways of managing on-street parking in the city. Our team did not include that in this plan, and that's because we felt that although, a lot of cities are actively involved in that sort of thing right now, we just don't have very many places in our city where that would be relevant. And so we didn't include that as a near priority in this plan. So those are our recommendations. We'd ask you to accept the advisory communication and refer the report to staff, and happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, thanks, Commissioner, for that report. And Mr. Day, thank you for being here as well. And you had one other colleague that worked on this matter with you as well.
Yes, Claire Hahnemann was also on the team. Unfortunately, she had a sick child tonight.
Oh, well, thanks to the three of you and everybody that worked with you for this. Member Jackson, I saw you taking notes. I bet you had a question that you wanted to ask as I see you rolling through the presentation here.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I want to go back to your calendar, the previous slide, and tell me, as we go through the comprehensive plan process, the plan is supposed to be completed by 2028. What parts of these need to be incorporated into the comprehensive plan so that these two calendars mesh up appropriately?
I guess I'd ask Addison to comment on that further, but our mindset has been that this is a distinct or a discrete activity from the comprehensive plan.
Okay.
So it competes with resources, but it's not integrated.
Okay, so we could have, so this doesn't need to be in the comprehensive plan?
Correct, yeah,
Okay.
I would agree with that assessment. These would be independent things.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Yes. Member Agnew.
Thank you, and thank you so much for an amazing presentation and for all of the work that I know all three of you put into this effort. Just thank you for that to begin with. I do want to understand, you mentioned a little bit, Commissioner Alkire, about the evaluation into paid and how paid parking options, and that wasn't a part of this recommendation. I'm curious if you could speak a little bit more in depth, even something about like the concept of a parking benefit district, which I'm sure came up in some of your research and analysis. What was the discussion within the group around that? Maybe even help educate us as a council, if you can, off the top of your head, what that could mean, and then why you decided to not make that as a part of your recommendation.
Great. Parking benefit districts are fantastic tools for cities. Basically, I don't want to tell everybody things they already know, but very briefly, it's a way of having paid parking, but having the proceeds benefit the immediate community around. So for example, if you had paid parking at 44th and France, all the revenue from those meters or from whatever the system you implemented would be used to pay for lighting or street furniture or bike racks or benefits to that immediate node. It's a wonderful concept. Our thought was there's really only two areas where that applies in Edina: 44th in France, 50th in France. And the scale of the curb feet that you could implement a parking benefit district is small compared to the complexity and cost of implementing a program like that. So I could be a fan of it, but also feel like it's not really practical in this particular case. And the team had probably a different idea of what we should look at in those areas, particularly at 50th in France, where we have excellent district parking. Why do we even allow on-street parking on the west side of France at all? So rather than implementing a parking benefit district, maybe we should be looking at other things for on-street parking at 50th in France, say.
Thank you. I appreciate the thorough answer in that. And so with this, and I thank you for keeping the recommendations up, I understand that there's a lot of logic that went into here, right? We initiate by doing the audit to understand where do we want to dig in deeper, where are the best opportunities. But I'm curious, and maybe I'm going to ask this question, pose the question to both of you. What in your research are you most excited about, and do you think will add the most benefit to the community of Edina when we think about enhancements to our current parking structure, I'll say?
Well, I'll take a stab at that, and then maybe Ryan, we may have different answers on that one. For me, when I look at what the city could be like in 10 or 15 years, I think the greatest opportunities have to do with changes in on-street parking. Some of the items that were mentioned in here about strategic use of one-side no parking, strategic use of one-way streets is it's an excellent low-cost way to create space for ped and bike facilities, and we just don't do it. So I think those kinds of things on the on-street side are probably the most impactful and most exciting to me.
So I wasn't prepared to present tonight, but I will answer that question. For me, I agree with most of what David said in terms of what this can provide for the community. I like the district model we have at 50th in France, and I'd like to see it emulated in other parts of the city. I know it doesn't necessarily apply well in other areas, but really just, I know that, we're attracted to that area. My wife and I, we go there because it's so easy to park and it's so easy to get around. And if you have that in other areas, that would be great. I think the other part of this, I'm excited about as we dig into parking is How we manage, over the next few years, we're going to be growing significantly, and so we're going to be adding probably cars to our infrastructure rather than taking away. And so thinking about how we manage that in an effective way and balance pedestrian safety, balance traffic flows and stuff like that, thinking about how parking plays a role in that. If we dig into this, hopefully we can get some answers there and help with our goals for the climate action plan and the comp plan and whatnot. So.
Thank you. Thank you both.
Member Pierce.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Echo, thank you for the presentation. I always love when we start out with, we're going to collect more data. And that's, to me, what doing the audit means, because when we do a good job at that, we tend to make better decisions when we have good data. The only thing I would ask you to consider doing is, we don't really talk about changing behavior in here. Now, some of the recommendations that you're making, I think, do require a behavioral change, but I kind of would like to see that specifically called out as an objective. And so I'm going to give an example. And we use that area a lot. If I go to Edina Grill, I park on the street. Why? Because it's convenient. There's no reason I can't use district parking. But if you told me I couldn't park right in front of Edina Grill, I would use district parking because I use it when I go to the movies. So if there's a way that we can think about, all right, we want to shift your behaviors, so think differently when you're in that area. I think if we can start a little bit more of that momentum, I actually think it may help us get more of the planning in place. And that's just one example that I would offer. And so I would really love to see some of the verbiage throughout here. Maybe it's an objective or a goal to say we want to align consumer behavior with in a way that helps facilitate more bike and ped traffic on the street, right? Something like that, so that when we get into comprehensive planning, even though the processes are different, you'll still use some of those goals when we start that process. People will refer back to these documents, for sure they will. And if you have an element in there that says we would love to try to think about how we might change behavior to achieve a certain outcome, I think that'd be a good add.
Thank you.
Thank you. Member Risser.
Thank you, and I agree with what my colleagues have said and really do appreciate your report. I did request an image be shown tonight, and my concern, I've been focusing lately on, what is the pedestrian and what is the bike experience along arterials and collectors. And I really appreciate you raising the US Bank project. And in the way you do an audit, I don't know if it would be possible to also think about how vehicles are going to be entering into that parking ramp if it's built. Because the entry is off of France Avenue. And my pedestrian experience walking north in front of that US Bank building, it's really frustrating because you're walking forward, but you've got to be looking back to make sure a car isn't coming up behind you. And I did almost get wiped out one day. And so I imagine greater volumes of traffic flowing into that ramp. And I don't know if it were to be created, how many vehicles per day are going to be going in and out, and how is that going to impact the pedestrian experience? I think I had another image. This one, though, this is the garage door at the Lorient, and I want you to see this is a short driveway that goes onto France Avenue, and there's no parking in the apron area. And that's just sort of logical. If we could go to the other image. Thank you. And then there's one along Valley View Road, the I just have the Excelsior and Grand. Okay. I did have an image that showed a vehicle parked in the driveway that is off of Valley View Road for one of the row at Valley View units, and it blocks the sidewalk. And that is a common occurrence. And so you've got a driveway that is functioning as a parking space, and you've got a sidewalk that could be a sidewalk some of the time when it's not functioning as a driveway. Also in that neighborhood, you've got View 44 that has the bike trail in front of it, and the way that building was designed specifically, the architect said people are going to do short-term parking on top of the bike path. They're going to run in. They do the response that I've got, and there's signage saying you cannot short-term park. And the idea is, well, just call the police officers and have a police officer beamed to the site instantaneously. But, you know, the Amazon truck is going to be gone really quickly. So that isn't a viable option. But I would really ask, you know, your statement that parking is competing for other things is so important and needs to be kept, you know, at the core of what you're doing, because it's complicated. And I think what we're beginning to see, especially with the push for density, is, you know, it can be a sidewalk or a driveway. It can be a bike path or short-term parking. And that's not a good way to go. And so we need to be coming up with ways to really say, okay, if it's a really short driveway off of a collector or an arterial to a private residence, you can't use that space to park or something like that. But, you know, try to get some sort of mechanism in place so that we, you know, are not only just accelerating development of bike and ped facilities, but not undermining them, because that really is a concern of mine, especially, you know, areas where you've got neighborhoods and kids going to parks, kids, you know, going to school. Positive note, so exciting this morning, walking the dog, seeing kids walking to school along Concord on that new sidewalk, and that was just great. So I wanted to end on a positive note, but thank you for everything that you are doing.
On this district parking issue, yeah, go ahead, Member Jackson.
So I forgot to say thank you. I was so excited about implementing this already. I'm like, okay, let's get at it. So thank you. This is really wonderful work. I especially appreciate the way you looked at the workflow across different commissions. It's not 100% on the Planning Commission to do this, because it is a big job. And I want to acknowledge the excellent and hard work that you guys put into this. And the one thing that just jumped out at me in particular was to update the surface parking standards so that we can make this things we have as efficient and as safe as possible. So that was really a wonderful point, but I did want to say thank you.
Thanks.
On the district parking issue, you think about that potential opportunity or potential opportunities different places. You mentioned Valley View, or you mentioned 70th and Cahill. And you think about what the project we approved at 70th in France, the U.S. Bank project. That's a great opportunity and it is something tantamount to district parking there. When you were looking at district parking as an issue, did you look at any potential financing mechanisms for it?
No.
Okay.
We don't have that level of solution.
Okay. That's fine. I suspected you didn't. And then with respect to the motion to accept the advisory communication on parking and refer it to staff, what does that mean? Is that, again, are you just going to pivot and hand it back to these guys that wrote the menu and tell them that they're good cooks after all? Are they good enough cooks?
So we hold on to it, and when we're developing work plans in the future for either like our departments as staff or future commission work plans, we would refer to this and look to incorporate it where it makes sense, unless we hear differently from you.
Yeah, all right, no, thanks. Doesn't sound like you'll be turned into cook soon. Well, thank you so much, and my colleagues have expressed this well. We really appreciate this fine work that was done. Is there a motion to accept the Planning Commission advisory communication on parking and refer it to staff?
So moved.
Second.
Member Agnew moves, Member Pierce seconds the motion as stated to accept the Planning Commission advisory communication on parking and refer it to staff. Any further discussion? All those in favor of adoption of the motion as stated say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Carried. Motion's adopted. We will refer the good work of our colleagues on the Planning Commission to the staff. Thank you. Thanks for being here this evening. Okay, let me see here. Oops, I went too far back. I got to find that next matter here, which is a resolution accepting donations. As is our practice, and in our community, we've got folks wanting to make gifts to the city in one form or another, and these get embodied in resolutions. This time it's embodied in Resolution 2025-22. Is there a motion to adopt Resolution 2025-22, which would accept donations on behalf of the city of Edina?
So moved.
Second.
Member Jackson moves, Member Pierce seconds the adoption of Resolution 2025-22. Any further discussion? All those in favor of adopting Resolution 2025-22 say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Carried. There is one donation in here for this particular reporting period. And Clerk Allison, I see your name is misspelled on the resolution. You'll fix that. Edina Arts Center, a donation from Kowalski Companies, groceries for good causes, it says, $800 in value. Thank you, Kowalski's, for that generous gift. And then we have one other matter on the agenda this evening for potential action, and it involves something that Member Agnew brought up to us a couple of months ago now, probably, and we've been talking about this concern about the sale of inhumanely bred animals and what we might do about that in terms of regulating it or banning it in the city of Edina. And Member Agnew has continued to take the lead on it and has gotten some good input, I think, from various sources. I'm going to turn now to her to talk about the latest version of this particular proposed ordinance. Member Agnew.
Thank you so much, Mayor, and thank you to our guests who have stuck through a longer meeting tonight than I think we anticipated. So this was first presented a couple of months ago after Ursula Pelka in our community reached out, and this was something really near and dear to her heart. And when I learned more about it, dug into it, really felt like it made sense to implement something within the community. So worked with the city, came up with a draft, and that is what we reviewed when we did our first reading. I'm forgetting the date, but it was a couple of months ago. And then the intention was for us to circle back and do our second reading. But after that first reading was done, I did have some engagement from the Humane Society. And those discussions led to some further improvements, I think, and iteration on the ordinance as drafted. So what we have before us tonight, I think everyone received a printed copy. There's specifically red lines or additions that were made to the ordinance. Some of these were really around definitions, and that was partially because when we had the conversation about this, there was some confusion about what is a kennel and what is a pet store, and so wanted to add some clarification into some of those terms. And then the other part of this is specifically, I'll call attention to Section 8-118, Section B under there. No pet store under this chapter shall sell, deliver, offer for sale, barter, auction, give away, or otherwise transfer or dispose of cats or dogs. So that, in comparison to the ordinance that we previously had reviewed, is, I would say, stronger language in the sense that we had previously really been relying, in the ordinance that we looked at and approved for first reading, we were relying on the USDA's licensure. I've now learned more about, thanks to the Humane Society, some of the pitfalls, I'll say, with that overall licensure that's offered from the USDA, and it really doesn't hold breeders accountable or raise the level of expectations that I have of what does it mean to have humanely bred animals. And so that's where you see that reference to the USDA licensure was removed from that section. And it was a little bit more strongly worded, I'll say. So my ask, one, I wanted to present this again for discussion and get some feedback. What we would be doing tonight is, if there's, I'll say, general consensus, and Manager Neal can correct me on this, but if there's general consensus, what then will happen is we will finalize the update and do the final and second reading on March 18th.
Right.
But wanted some discussion before we go down that path.
Very good. Yeah, Member Risser.
Item B that you just read, I'm assuming because it is under Section 8-118, it refers to inhumanely bred animals and doesn't mean that a pet store couldn't sell a dog that had been humanely bred.
So the intention of this and the way that it's supposed to be written is that no pet store shall sell, deliver, offer for sale dogs or cats. So that would leave open that they could sell other kinds of pets. But I'll also offer, one, we don't have any pet stores in Edina today. And two, it also, if you go then onto the back of that page under Section 3, it doesn't prevent them from still partnering with animal shelters or animal rescue organizations to offer dogs and cats out of that pet store. But it's not done direct through the breeders.
The way I would interpret that Section B that Member Risser mentioned is that it says no pet store under this chapter. I'm assuming that this chapter pertains only to the potential sale or showcase of inhumanely bred animals. If it's broader than that, then we need to, if the chapter is broader than that, then we need to have some clarification around that. Has our city attorney looked at the proposed changes? Do you know?
Just the same, I mean, today, just like right now, like you are too.
And any concerns about structure?
Mayor, I don't have any issues with adding the definitions of animal shelter and animal rescue organization. I think there's potential confusion with the addition of the pet store definition, just because I used commercial kennel when I drafted the original one, because that definition currently exists in city ordinance. So I was trying to kind of tie this into the existing language. So I think we'd have to try to reconcile, the meaning of commercial kennel with the meaning of pet store to make sure there's no overlap or confusion there.
Okay, and that's something you could work on between now and March 18th, I take it?
Sure.
Yeah, but to the point that Member Agnew is making, are we comfortable going forward to the next step and having a draft of an ordinance and potentially in place for adoption on a first and second reading basis on March 18th? That's the question you're asking.
Mayor, I think I'd recommend doing that if you're willing. And I'd also, I guess I need some guidance on whether the intent of this is to completely prohibit all sale of cats and dogs in pet stores, or just to prohibit the sale of inhumanely bred animals in pet stores.
So I'll respond to that because this was where a lot of my discussion and conversation with the Humane Society really centered around. It goes back to how do we define or govern specifically what does it mean to be humanely or inhumanely bred? We had initially as a city relied on the USDA's definition of that. One, because that's really one of the only options that's available, right? It's this licensure, it's an organization that's out there, but that doesn't meet the needs or expectations that I have of the ordinance that I'd like to put forward. A couple of reasons why. A USDA licensed facility may legally confine dogs in cages only 6 inches larger than their bodies, keep hundreds of dogs stacked in stacked or elevated cages, provide only wire flooring, expose dogs to frigid or sweltering temperatures for hours, breed dogs repeatedly and excessively without limits, deny hands-on veterinary care to sick or injured dogs, and kill dogs they no longer want. And so it's that reason that I elected to remove the USDA reference from this ordinance. And because of that, I am proposing that we say no pet store may sell dogs or cats. This doesn't prevent humane breeders from selling them directly themselves, is the intention of what I have. But when you research pet stores and kind of the ways that they operate, you don't see ethical, humane breeders partnering with pet stores to sell their animals typically.
Remind us again, do we allow pet store operations in Edina? I don't think we have any, but.
We do allow them by city code, but we just don't have any right now.
Right, okay, so they're allowed so that, understand the importance of what you're talking about then. So to be clear, the question that Mr. Kendall asked, your intention is to prevent the sale of dogs or cats that have been inhumanely bred. Not this, if we had a pet store in town, to Member Risser's point, that wanted to sell cats and dogs, but they were humanely bred, you have no objection to that?
I think the challenge becomes, how do we then define that? And we don't have, I think, a clean way to define that. So my recommendation is to say that pet stores cannot sell dogs or cats,
regardless of how they were bred.
But it doesn't prevent them from partnering with animal shelters or animal rescue organizations to still offer dogs and cats.
Member Jackson.
So I kind of want to see how this would work. So I remember walking into a pet store and they say, here are the animals we have from the local rescue league, you know, come meet them, sort of thing. And they have the cages set up. So I assume that is what partnering could look like. And then that's when section D that says in a conspicuous place, say where each animal came from. Because obviously they're not selling them, but they could be, you know, connecting families with pets. And each of those animals would then have their sourcing right there so you could read it. So I'm getting that right? That's what
yes.
Okay.
I was head nodding, but I'm not on video.
Okay, great, thank you.
Member Pierce.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. So I agree with the humane treatment of all pets. Start with that. But I don't see how we can have an ordinance that says that a business can't sell cats and dogs. And so to me, that's, maybe this parallel isn't accurate, but I'm going to say it this way just for effect. To me, that'd be like us saying to Jerry's, you can't sell eggs unless they're organic eggs. Because we know that. So I worked for Cargill for 30 years. And so we know that there are inhumane ways of providing poultry, providing eggs, right? And so the way grocery stores try to do that is they actually give the definitions, right? And so if you want a humane egg, then here, you buy this brand, you don't buy that brand, right? That's what's implied by it. And so to me, it's hard for us to say that a pet store can't sell cats or dogs. And if our objective is to ensure that if pets are sold, that they're humanely treated, then I want to say, well, how do we answer the question of what's humane and what's not? I don't know how you do that at a pet store, but we didn't buy our dog from a pet store because we couldn't answer that question. So we did research for the breeder, and we have a certificate that says little Teddy here's his parents, right? Here's how many brothers and sisters he has, and here's what happened to his mom and dad after the limit was reached on how many dogs they were going to breed. And so we got comfortable that, you know, this breeder we purchased from was humanely raising puppies. And so I think that's the outcome we want, right? And so I don't know how we do that without leaning into, well, how then do you define it? So I struggle with. It just seems like us saying, well, you can't sell cats and dogs. I don't know that that solves the problem of inhumanely treated animals. Does that make sense?
Would folks be comfortable with the notion of pushing this the way of Attorney Kendall to see if he can wrestle with that issue of defining inhumanely bred animals? Member Jackson?
I want to just, I heard two issues in that. One is, with food, I think the USDA regulations around food are much more detailed than they are around the sale of pets. And I think that's the problem Member Agnew's wrestling with. And then the second question is, do we have the power to limit the sale of cats and dogs? And that would be an Attorney Kendall question. Is that fair?
Well, I think, yes, I gave those examples, but the intent of the examples was to say, I think we have to lean into how do we define it if that's the outcome that we truly want. That's all I was saying.
If you had a pet store operation under our existing code, how is that pet store operation defined?
I might have to defer to Mr. Teague on that one, Your Honor. I looked at the definition of commercial kennel, and that seems to kind of include pet stores because it talks about a place where 3 or more dogs are kept for multiple purposes, including sale. So I think if 3 or more dogs were kept for sale, I think that would, the definition of commercial kennel in the existing city ordinance would encompass a pet store, which is why I didn't separately define pet store in my first attempt, because I was trying to use existing city code and work this in. So I don't know if, for zoning purposes, there may be a separate discussion or definition of pet store. I defer to Director Teague on that one.
Yeah, I just checked. We don't have a definition of pet store, but they are listed as a permitted use. So we would probably then refer to the commercial kennel definition.
So,
Member Pearson, Member Egan.
So, like, why, legally, I don't understand. I don't know all the legalese around this, but why could we not say, in the example I use, if you're going to sell cats and dogs, you have to provide the, I can't think of the way I want to say blockchain, but nobody knows what that is, but the record of, a dog or cat, and you get the 2 certificates. Like, I would think that you could require a pet store that's going to operate in Edina to provide that kind of documentation if they're going to do it versus, and I would rather that.
It's pedigree or whatever, I don't know if that's the right word or not either.
As opposed to just saying, well, you can't sell. That just doesn't feel right to me. But seems like you could say, well, if you're going to do it, then you have to provide to the owner this documentation that shows where these animals came from and proof that they are being bred humanely.
So I appreciate this dialogue because this is exactly some of the things that I've been wrestling with myself. And as I was attempting to kind of distinguish that, the feedback that I got from the Humane Society in having these conversations was, you don't see humanely bred animals from those breeders then going and being sold from pet stores. And so in that sense, like, I'm open to us trying to identify what that language should be, and if it can be strict enough and require the blockchain of the animal in the same way of guaranteeing that it's humanely bred, I'm comfortable still allowing it. I just don't think it's going to happen. And so that's fine. Like, I think that that's a good challenge for maybe Kendall and maybe myself, and maybe even looping in the Humane Society to have some of those conversations. I don't necessarily think, though, that it's quite representative to use the egg analysis, in the sense that we sell eggs today in Edina, and it would be a change to what's happening today, whereas we don't have pet stores. So it's not like we're stopping something that is happening today.
So did you say that pet stores do not sell humanely bred animals?
I want to be careful with the language I'm using here. I think that that's a good clarification. Today, my understanding of the situation is that the governing body or the licensure that we have is the USDA. And so that is where I provided kind of some analysis done by the Humane Society on some of the pitfalls of what that means. In conversations, and I couldn't say that this is backed up with fact, but in conversations, it felt like most breeders who are breeding their animals humanely usually are not selling in pet stores. But I should have used less decisive language in that.
Okay. And then just to clarify, I was trying to use an analogy on the egg thing. And so maybe that's not the best analogy to use. So I won't use a different analogy, but I think you guys get my point there.
Member Jackson, then I've got a point I want to make too from looking at the language here.
I actually thought the egg analogy was really helpful. And I'll tell you why. Because the USDA is currently the regulating body for what pet stores can do. It's insufficient in Member Agnew's eyes, and I agree with her. I don't want us stepping into the shoes of the USDA, coming up with standards for what is humanely bred, and then we have to regulate that, which means we'd have to hire staff to do that with expertise in the humane breeding of animals, or how to interpret that language, which we are drafting in the place of the federal government. So to me, Member Agnew's come up with a really elegant solution to just say, let's just ban sale of cats and dogs in pet stores altogether. And so I agree with the way it's been drafted.
And I also want to just add, because I don't want to be misquoted or misconstrued or any of that, but in communication with the public policy specialists at the Humane Society, their perspective was that most responsible breeders would never sell through a third party, such as a pet store, as many breeder associations specifically prohibit it in their bylaws, because they take pride in meeting potential families and loading folks in to see where the puppies are raised. So that's a little bit more evidence for what I was alluding to, but just wanted to be more specific with that.
So I'm looking at the definition section here, and looking at the commercial kennel definition that Mr. Kendall came up with. Commercial kennel means a place where more than 3 dogs or other animals over 6 months of age are kept. Well, right off the bat, I'm thinking my daughter and her husband and kids out in Sioux Falls, they just had 6 black lab puppies, and they go out the door to loving families when they're about 8 weeks old. Not 6 months. So, but it says means a place where more than 3 dogs or animals over 6 months of age are kept, where the business of selling, boarding, breeding, showing, treating or grooming dogs or other animals is conducted. And then it says the definition of pet store means a commercial kennel where animals are sold, exchanged, bartered, or offered for sale to the general public at retail. Such definition shall not include an animal care facility or animal rescue organization as defined. So what do you do about the situation where the dog is less than 6 months old and it goes to a pet store? Am I misreading this, or is that a gap in there? I mean, if somebody gathers up inhumanely bred dogs that are just 8 weeks old and takes them to a pet store, couldn't they sell them because they're under the age of 6 months?
But Mayor, that definition about 6 months, that's in the existing definition in city ordinance? I'm not rewriting that, I'm just utilizing.
No, I know, you found it somewhere, you said that.
Yeah, so it's in section 8-5 of the existing city code.
Yeah.
So that's why I utilized that. I was just trying to fit this in with existing city code. And if necessary, the council can consider modifying that definition and all of the references in city code to commercial kennels and everything else. But that's where the 6 months came from, just from existing language.
Member Risser?
When you Google state of Minnesota definition pet store, you get a link to House File 1276 from 2023. And there's a definition of pet shop that's very clear. It just says pet shop means any pet dealer that operates a physical retail store from which animals are sold or offered for sale to the general public, whether through appointment or otherwise. And it looks like that bill did not pass, but it looks very similar to the bill you're proposing, including saying, don't sell cats and dogs. So there's precedent there.
You got a new one?
No, I don't. No, I'm following my my process of getting more data. So I think I can convince myself of probably some language that says no cats and dogs. I just looked up, does PetSmart sell cats and dogs? And they don't. And what they do is they partner with Humane Society, or my guess would be they could also partner with a breeder if they chose to. And so maybe I'm thinking about a problem that may not exist. You know, so maybe it's not.
I think it's a legitimate
I don't know.
issue that you raised.
But it does look like, what's another pet store? I can only think of PetSmart. Petco, yeah.
I was going to say Chewy, but.
Yeah.
Mostly they're pet supplies though, aren't they? I mean, usually.
So like it made me wonder if instead of saying you can't sell cats and dogs, that it has this kind of language in there that says if you do, you have to use what does this say? You have to use local shelters, right? You have to use charity adoption centers, that kind of verbiage. If you're going to do it, you have to do it in a humane way, and this is the this is the commercially standard way to do it, which is you're going to use Humane Society, or you could use a breeder that has all of the credentials or something like that. So that way we're not saying, well, you can't do it. You can do it, but we're going to prescribe this is how you do it in a humane way if you're in Edina.
And it is kind of confusing because it's on the back of the sheet as well. But Section C does try to open the door for partner or collaborating with animal shelters and animal rescue organizations. So you're saying some kind of play on that.
Right. All right, so this says nothing in this section shall prevent a pet store from doing kind of what I just said. And so I'm saying, well, maybe we say it stronger, you can't sell pets. You can't sell cats and dogs in Edina unless you're doing it this way. I think I'd be okay with some verbiage like that. Because then we're not telling a commercial business what they can and can't do. Well, we are saying we've got standards in how you do it. But if you want to sell cats and dogs, you can. You just have to follow these standards, which are probably commercially, I assume these are standards in the industry. That's what I'd like to be able to say.
All
All right, I'm done.
Okay. Are we shipping this to, are we generally comfortable with the notion we'll revisit this on the 18th of March and ship it to Mr. Kendall in the meantime to work on it, understanding what the concerns are that have been expressed, to see if he comes up with some ideas? Okay. All right. Very good. Next step is back at it on the 18th of March. I misspoke. We have one other matter to take care of in the action portion of the agenda. Manager Neal has it, and it is potential approval of the 2025 Board and Commission appointments. Manager Neal.
Thank you, Your Honor, members of council. We have just recently completed our interviews for board and commission positions, vacant board and commission positions for the upcoming year. We had 3 interview dates this year. We had 9 positions that we were appointing. And the council had the opportunity to meet as a group and go through the candidates and their respective qualifications and selected the slate that's in front of you tonight for appointment. We're presenting them to you tonight. Their term essentially began March 1st, so we're hoping you take an approval action tonight. If approved, they will begin their service with a training orientation session tomorrow night.
All right, questions from council members? Is there a motion to approve the 2025 board and commission appointments as shown on Schedule 8.3?
So moved.
Second.
Member Risser moves, Member Pierce seconds the adoption of the proposed slate of 2025 board and commission appointments as shown on item 8.3. Agenda number 8.3. Any further discussion? All those in favor of making those appointments, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Carried. The proposed appointments on for board and commission members embodied in 8.3 are approved. And now we are on to manager's comments.
Mr. Mayor, regarding 8.2, because there was a motion to actually approve that ordinance tonight, can I get a motion to table it until March 18th, please?
You sure can. Thank you.
So moved to table to March 18th.
Second.
All right, we got a motion second to approve, to table the potential approval of ordinance number 2025-01 to the meeting on March 18, 2025 of the Edina City Council. Any further discussion? All those in favor of tabling this matter that we just talked about on the proposed ordinance 2025-01, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Carried. That matter is tabled to the meeting on March 18th. And now we are on to manager's comments. Thank you, Clerk Allison.
Thank you, Your Honor, members of council. Earlier tonight, we had a pretty brief discussion about where we stand with regards to federal funds, and I think there was a question about this at our previous meeting. I asked Matthew Gabb, who works in our sustainability division, to put together this graphic. He's done a nice job with this and a nice job of tracking what kind of grant funds we have, where they come from, and kind of what their status is, right? So he's broken this down, our grant funding, into 3 different groups. Funding that will likely remain secure is the first one. Funding with signed agreements is the second section, and funding at risk is the third section. And then within each one of these, you can see that we have a number of grants that fit into each one of those categories, what the amount is and what the project is for. The B100 project is a synthetic fuel project that we have been working with not only the feds but also soybean farmers, I believe, to put together a new way of refueling our vehicles, particularly in the winter. We've got some special consideration there, but you can see the different transportation funding that we have, some energy efficiency block grants dollars that we have. Happy to take any questions anybody has about this. We will continue to keep this updated, and if we have new information, I'll bring this same sort of graphic back and indicate what we're looking at.
So is there any sense in moving forward with the USDA Higher Blends Infrastructure Incentive Program if we don't get the USDOE Federal Energy Efficiency Conservation Block Grant for the B100 vehicles? Aren't they linked?
Yeah, they are linked. So we need to have some additional discussion around that. I'm not sure if we can scale it down, but we need to keep our eye on that one.
Or we could look at more CAS funds to fill that gap. That was one of the plans we had too. If one of these didn't come through, right, we'd always have an option. If it doesn't, we would use more CAS funds to make sure we can do the project. So it's such a benefit to the city to do that B100 project.
And the CAS funds, of course, are locally generated. They're under our control, and we can use them for that purpose if we need to.
Yeah, and it was a great piece of work, I thought, reducing greenhouse gases with all our equipment by 90%. If I memory serves me right. So it'd be good to figure out how to do that. I don't see your federal grant in here for the bridge work on Highway 100.
Yeah, I think it's how you define federal funding. You know, that goes through Met Council for regional solicitation. So is it federal or is it already held at the state? There's kind of questions there on the status, but we could add those two here. It'd be the Rosin Park Ped Bridge.
And I think what he was trying to point out, because he used the word non-pass-through, I think he was intending to not count something that is coming to us from another agency, like a state or a county.
Yeah, well, I mean, it is federal funds coming our direction, destined to the region, so.
Yep, but we have
Might be good
agreements.
to include it on the list. Okay. That's good, yeah, that's good.
Second item is one that's listed is the 2025 Student Commission Onboarding Plan. Using our past practices, this applications would open on April 18th. Council appointments would happen on July 15th, and new terms would start on September 1st. And we usually ask the council for 2 volunteers to be part of the interview and selection process.
And what's the time frame for that one again? For serving?
Applications open on April 18th, council appointments on July 15th, so somewhere between April 18th and July, mostly in May, I believe, is when you're doing your selection process and interviews.
And then they would serve next school?
And then they start the next school year,
Okay.
September 1st.
Yeah, I'll volunteer to do that.
Thank you.
I think, yeah.
Councilmember Jackson?
It's fun. I'll do it too.
You've had so much fun the last 4
I
years.
have had so much fun with it, yeah. It's great.
Yeah.
I don't want to pretend like I haven't
partner
had
with
fun. I have also had fun, but I am happy to share the fun and relinquish my responsibility in your honor, Member Pierce.
All right.
So I heard Councilmember Pierce and Councilmember Jackson.
Jackson, yeah.
You're hired. All right. And the final item I have for you tonight, just to let you know that there is snow. We have an all-out snow response that's scheduled to begin around 3 a.m. tonight, so there'll be a lot of activity tonight. Hopefully the snow will wrap up and just in time for it to blow all over the roads again later tomorrow afternoon, probably.
All right, very good. Thanks
Thank
for
you.
that. All right. Member Agnew, you want to lead us off?
I would love to. Thank you. I have received, and I know others on the council have received, notes about trains and the train noises. And I understand that, Director, we sent out a notification, a communication that we had not received the grant that we were anticipating. So I'll pose this question. If you don't have an answer, we can always revisit it at another time. But I'm curious about what's next. What else can we do, or how else can we work with members of our community who their lives are being drastically impacted by the train noise? And I'm particularly meaning train noises overnight. I think others have received videos of like, this is how loud it is at in the middle of the night and how sleep is disturbed. So we'd just love if you have anything right now, or if we can bring it back with a plan for how we're going to potentially work with the train companies to combat this.
Thanks for the comment. So working with the rail they're a federal jurisdiction, and we have zero control unless we really go to our state and federal electeds. I think that's one opportunity to do the study. Just to study to identify mitigation factors of safety around rail would be $250,000 to $300,000. It's not budgeted. It's not in the CIP. So we're going to have a lot of discussions on the budget coming up. If the council so chooses that we should spend that type of capital on a project, then we could have that discussion in the future.
Has this been a topic of conversation that we've brought up in Washington when we go to speak with our legislatures?
Well, the operations just changed last summer. So
I
it
would
was
say
after
not.
you were there last spring. So this would be
We've talked a lot about airplane noise every year when we're there, but rail noise, not so much. Yeah.
Well, timely. I know that probably the agenda's already been refined, but I think folks are heading out next
Still
week.
can talk about it.
I really think it would be important for this to be brought forward. I know I've heard from tens to probably not 100, but a lot of people in our community that this is impacting. Next, I would also like to get the community comment discussion on the calendar. It's bubbled up a lot. We've heard a lot about it. We've read a lot about it in the paper and in other places. I don't know, Manager Neal, if we can get that scheduled, or if it was on us to say, let's schedule it. But I think personally, I think it would be good to just have the discussion as a council and then make a decision and move forward and not have it trickle.
Agreed. Yeah, we can get that scheduled for you.
Okay.
I think we could talk about it tonight, but I think it'd be better to have it scheduled on a future agenda so people know when we're going to talk about it.
Yeah, I agree. And then finally, I had brought this up when we were talking about the parking from the consent agenda, but when can we expect to revisit the high school parking lot topic? I don't know if that's something that we can even on the 18th or maybe April 1st, revisit that as a discussion with some additional information, but would like to see that sooner rather than later.
Yes, I think maybe the first week in April, I think, might be the right time.
I love it. I think that's it for me tonight. Thank you.
Good. Your prescience is noted. I'm holding my Edina Mayor's Minute for tomorrow, and it's all about the railroad crossing issue. So I'll pass this down, you can read this. So I'll do it later. Member Pierce.
So, yeah, I'll be brief. The train noise, I definitely appreciate, and we have to be clear about what the effort is, right? So we have to talk about that, the cost, and so that's definitely fair that we be clear about that. But I would still ask us to do what we can to be focused on resolving an issue for our residents. I don't actually know how to do that. I did exchange an email today, and I just shared that, our family had a similar issue in Hopkins. We were in a townhome, and we were told the train only came through during business hours 3 or 4 times, and it turned out it came through business hours once. The other 3 times, once was during dinner, 2 times at night. But we were temporarily there. And so I made T-shirts that said chugga chugga choo choo. And every time the train came by, that's what we did. But we weren't living there for longer than 6 or 7 months. And so I definitely think we should lean into trying to figure out if there's something that we can do. And so that was one. We need to put to rest the community comment thing. So I agree with that. I won't say anything else on that one. And then third, I mentioned this earlier, And I know we'll address this. The 14 trees that were cut down, like that really does bother me. And so I know we're going to lean into that one as well. And then last thing is, hope everybody be safe tonight.
Thank you, Member Pierce. Member Jackson.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So these are two things I meant to say last meeting, so I'm going to say it now. First of all, I want to acknowledge that our very own city engineer, Chad Milner, was named the Engineer of the Year by the City Engineers Association of Minnesota, and I wanted to highlight that, and we think you do a great job, and it's lovely to see that your peers agree, so congratulations on that.
Thank you.
Yes, and then the other thing was on Valentine's Day, I was invited to over to Creek Valley School, and they have Make a Difference Day, and that was really fun. And I got to talk about what the city does, and what the police do, and what the firemen do. And next time, I'm going to bring somebody in a shiny uniform with me because they're more exciting than an old lady talking about it. But it was really fun, and I wanted to say thank you to Creek Valley for including the city in that discussion.
Thank you. Member Risser.
I didn't have anything, but I really appreciate the chart that Manager Neal showed with the federal funding, and I'm wondering if we could get that up on the city website. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay.
We did State of the Community today with the school district, and we gave a fond farewell or a send-off to Stacy Stanley, our school superintendent. We gave her a key to the city. I think she was really quite taken with the affection that our town has shown her in the short time that she's been here, that how much we appreciate her and care about her. And that was really terrific. And Director Benarat did an unbelievable job of setting up the whole, along with the school district communications team, but started out with a game of Jeopardy that was really well done, and I think people really enjoyed that as well. Some folks are heading off to the National League of Cities. Wish you the best on that, and I'm sure you'll learn a lot. It's an important time to be going to these functions. I'll talk about my last trip here to the U.S. Conference of Mayor Leadership meeting in Phoenix a week or so ago in just a couple minutes. We had a joint meeting with the school board last night with Microsoft to talk about general overview on AI and its applications, both from a civic standpoint, a city standpoint, and a school district standpoint. That was interesting. It's good to get together with our colleagues in the school board. MLC and Southwest LRT meetings I have tomorrow. Congratulations to the girls hockey team. They almost pulled it off 2 years in a row. They're just a great bunch of young women, and losing in overtime to the team they beat last year, Hill Murray, was tough, but they are, and we'll have to get them in here because they are true champions. And then our boys hockey team plays Thursday night, and so we got to be mindful of that too. They're back in the state hockey tournament, and that's a wonderful thing. And then several of us know that there is a down at 50th and France, we've had a holiday tree, we've had a menorah, and then Ramadan is just starting up, and we're going to be celebrating that down there. I think it's on the 12th of March at 6:15 p.m. with a sculpture that's going to be going up in approximately the same location that the menorah was in. So anybody that wants to come down that's interested in that, feel free to come down. And then those slides, I guess we could show those slides real quick. I went a week ago, Monday, to the groundbreaking for what I learned now is the way you pronounce it is Adolphson. You've got emphasis on the A. Adolphson and Peterson, new corporate headquarters that'll be built at 7250 France. And this is the group of people that showed up to celebrate that. They were so excited to be in Edina. We can maybe show the next one as well, where they had the little stage and the people getting ready to throw a little sand. But they, as I said, they are so excited to have their corporate headquarters in Edina at 7250 France, and they'll be a great addition to our community. And if we'll see what happens with Opus as well. But Adolphson and Peterson, we welcome you in advance to the city of Edina. Thank you. for being interested in being here. We appreciate it greatly. Manager Neal, one thing I forgot to ask you about was there's been some chatter online about the Innovation Lab and its kind of suspension of operations and what's characterized as a loan by the city to the Innovation Lab. To my knowledge, we never made a loan to the Innovation Lab. We made a loan to the Chamber of Commerce that they still are responsible for repaying.
That's correct. And we expect
there are certain
repayment.
forgiveness elements to it,
right,
based on longevity and performance.
Previously approved by the council,
by the lab.
NHRA.
But, the chamber is taking on full responsibility for repayment of that debt obligation.
They are.
All right. And then I know there are folks in our community that are always interested about, when those of us that go away for these sessions at like National League of Cities or U.S. Conference of Mayors, the leadership meeting in Phoenix, starting on the 21st, went out there the night of the 20th, and the 21st we started out. It was probably one of the more consequential meetings that we've had in quite a few years based on what's going on in Washington, some of the things we talked about federal funding-wise. We had a conversation around the fiscal year 2025 appropriations and possible shutdown, budget reconciliation, reviewing pathways on housing legislation, which is a top priority for the U.S. Conference of Mayors. We had the Honorable Greg Stanton there, who is the U.S. House of Representatives representative for the Phoenix area, who used to be the mayor of Phoenix, and he got his perspective on what was happening. We had the results of a U.S. Conference of Mayors survey on federal funding freeze and possible impoundment as a result of DOGE decisions, and that was interesting. And then report outs from all the standing chairs of the standing committees and the potential, the things that we're all being mindful of from the standpoint of our respective committees. So it's criminal justice, and it's immigration, and it's and that's Kansas City, San Diego, Mayor of Columbia, South Carolina on energy, and then the Mayor of Issaquah, Washington on the Environmental Standing Committee, Mayor Bolwage from Elizabeth, New Jersey on Brownfield, and then I reported out on transportation and some of the issues we're concerned about. I think the thing we're most concerned about is transit, continued transit funding. It seems like roads and bridges may be in pretty good shape. We talked earlier about did the city have a contract with the federal government on that grant? It seems like things are falling into three categories. If you have a grant, a discretionary grant, and there was a contract in place, you should be in pretty good shape. If you got a discretionary grant and you don't yet have a contract, it's not certain whether it's going to go forward or not, or at all. If you have a discretionary grant and no contract, and it involves an area where they've put some emphasis around the environment, around energy, and so like our federal grant here, they're at great risk. Anything involving clean energy, those are really at risk. So we'll have to stay tuned and see what happens there. We're going to put a lot of concentration from a U.S. Conference of Mayors standpoint and the Standing Committee on Transportation around the next reauthorization, which the IIJA, the infrastructure law, expires September 30th, 2026. The reauthorization will come then, and we'll have to make sure that we get cities fully protected and make sure that those streams of revenue still are coming down to from the federal government to the states and on down to the regions and cities of our country. So other mayors that reported out were involved in different types of task forces, technology and innovation, education, children's health and human services, parks, entertainment, reports out by several mayors around the country on already experiencing impact. We had a working lunch, and then we had a meeting online with the Director of Intergovernmental Affairs from the White House, who was a former mayor of a smaller town in New Jersey, and also the Deputy Director for Local Government at the White House. And then we had also the new head of HUD by video, and Scott Turner, and had his presentation, listened to that. And then we had Rick Larson, who is a 24-year member of Congress from the state of Washington, as a ranking member on transportation. He was there as well. The House Transportation Infrastructure Committee controls about half of the IIJA discretionary funds. And so that's about $650 billion in authorization. And they've got a really effective working committee. They've got really good bipartisan working relationship amongst that entire committee. So that was encouraging to hear. People concerned in speaking about the dismantling of barriers that involve, I'll call it inclusiveness in a just future. The mayor of Tucson, Regina Romero, who chairs the Women's Health and Reproductive Rights Task Force, talked about topics around diversity, equity, and inclusion. We all did, as a matter of fact, on Saturday at great length, talk about city commitments to continuing that work and the reasons why. Pay equity, jobs, education, childcare, paid family leave, eviction issues that are popping up. Also, we had the head of the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, all the mayors in Canada, the big city mayors. That is headed this year by Scott Gillingham, who is the mayor of Winnipeg, who is that's a sister city of Minneapolis. So, that was like that's a city that's 2 hours from where I grew up in Grand Forks. So that was our big city. So we had a lot in common and had some really good conversation. Reports out on violent crime from Jerry Dwyer, former police chief from Fresno, who's now the mayor of Fresno. Had some panelists that spoke on the issue of making our cities safer. Kate Gallego from Phoenix, Tito Brown from Youngstown, Ohio, Cavalier Johnson from our neighboring state of Wisconsin, who's the mayor of Milwaukee, and then Todd Gloria, who is the second vice president, who's the present mayor of San Diego. And Jane Castor as well, who's the former police chief of Tampa, who is now the mayor of Tampa. All of them providing some real interesting information. And then we had a meeting that same afternoon with representatives from ICE, including the acting deputy director, who's been with them for 36 years. Their general statement was, and I wrote this down, is that when they are in the field, they know exactly who they're looking for. They don't arrest kids, they say. They don't. Every arrest goes through a formal protocol. They're after that they characterize as the bad guys. They're after criminals, and there's a lot of false narratives out there, they claim, of what they do. They claim, as I said, that, and they state unequivocally that they are after the bad guys, and there's an administrative process once they're picked up. But we know from news in our own part of the world that some people are being picked up that don't have a criminal record. So anyway, there's a lot to talk about there, and our own chief has talked about the relationship with ICE. These two guys were very impressive, and they got a lot of support from the mayors. And we told them that we were concerned about them and the work that they do, and wanted to make sure that they understood that we were supportive of the things that they were doing based on what they said. A lot of conversation in the afternoon, as I mentioned, around, this is on Saturday now, morning. We had people from the Kellogg Foundation there talking about racial healing for all communities. We had a session with the new National Medal of Honor Museum, which is done in Arlington, Texas, and they were up to talk about and make a presentation about leaders of character and the new museum, and talk about the things that were down there. And then other housekeeping sort of things. David Holt, the mayor of Oklahoma City, had some housekeeping. He's the incoming president in June. Some things that he wanted to see done relative to bylaws, other things of that nature. And then we finally got to see a little sunshine mid-afternoon on Saturday, and otherwise it was just a packed session, really valuable, I think, in terms of understanding what's going on in other cities. So I hope that's helpful for all of you and folks in our town as well. The Legislative Action Committee for the U.S. Conference of Mayors, one of the things that we're most worried about is the protection of the tax exempt status of municipal bonds. Oh, yeah. And that is at risk. at the federal government level as they look for new sources of revenue. And that's going to be one of the main things that we put emphasis on, is protecting that tax exempt status on municipal bonds, because it's so critical to all the things that cities do all across the country. So I think that's it for me. That was quite a few things on my list. Thanks for your patience. And anything else from anybody? Did that prompt anything that anyone thought of? All right. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Got a motion to adjourn by Member Jackson, second by Member Pierce. Any further discussion? All those in favor of adjournment, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried? Or nays? And the motion to adjourn is granted. We stand adjourned.
Oh, my goodness.